Welcome to Obscure Chronicle, where we wander softly through the forgotten corners of history. In this quiet space, we light a single candle and watch the way its flame bends in the slightest breeze. We listen to the creak of old timbers and the hush of waves breaking against unseen hulls. We breathe in the scent of salt, tar, and worn rope, and we let our minds drift to a time when men lived their entire lives between sky and sea. Our story tonight is not the one you've seen painted on tavern signs or splashed across cinema screens. We will not shout of buried treasure or raise tankards to heroes who never existed. We want to understand what it was really like to live aboard a pirate ship in the 17th century, when the world was newly mapped and still partly unknown. We want to feel the dampness of sleeping quarters, to trace the calluses on hands hardened by rope and salt, to hear the laughter and groans that filled those cramped wooden spaces. Imagine the darkness before dawn, when the horizon was nothing but shadow and the stars were still bright. Imagine the soft scrape of a deck brush, the whisper of bare feet on planks, the low murmur of voices in a dozen languages. Men from different lands, England, Spain, Africa, the Caribbean, stood together in the dimness, bound not by national flags but by a set of rules they had all agreed to follow. They pulled together on ropes that were fraying. They shared bread that was going stale. They told stories to keep fear at bay. And sometimes they sang songs, just to feel their hearts beating in time. Above them, the Jolly Roger might have hung limp in the still air, waiting to be unfurled when a prize appeared. Below them, the sea held its own secrets, currents that could turn a ship or swallow it whole, creatures that flashed silver in the moonlight, then vanished into the black depths. Life on a pirate ship was full of contradictions. There was cruelty and camaraderie, hunger and sudden feasts, boredom and moments of terror. There was democracy, of a rough sort, in a world that rarely allowed ordinary men a voice. As we begin this journey, we ask you to step quietly. Let the wind fill the sails. Let the ship's bell mark the passing hours, and let the fog wrap around us as we listen. Not everything must be solved to be remembered. Some stories are meant to be felt, like the swell of a wave beneath our feet. Perhaps that is all they ever wanted, to find a place where their names could drift into the mist like the rest of them. There is a quiet hour on the coastline when the world seems to hold its breath. Dawn has not yet broken, but the sky is beginning to pale, and the sea is a sheet of pewter stretching into the unknown. In that suspended moment, when land and water meet in mist and hushed waves, a young man might pause with rope calloused in his hands and wonder why his heart aches for something beyond the horizon. He might wonder why his feet itch to leave the muddy streets he knows and set themselves on planks that rise and fall with the tide. The smell of salt and tar is already part of him. The creak of hulls is a lullaby. The call of the sea is like a whispered promise he cannot quite hear, but he feels it pulling, tugging, insisting that there is more out there than what his masters have offered him. That whisper becomes the first step toward a life that history will call piracy. But for him, in that quiet dawn, it is something softer, the possibility of choosing his own path. Life ashore in the 17th century was hard and often hopeless for a boy born into poverty. Fields offered back-breaking labour for scant reward. Workshops demanded long hours and produced little more than calluses. Laws were written by men of property and upheld with a brutality that taught workers their place. If he was unlucky, he could be snatched by a press gang on his way home. forced into service aboard a naval ship without so much as a fare-thee-well to his mother. If he was apprenticed, he was bound to serve 7 years under another's authority, his pay withheld, his future already decided. Even those who chose the sea willingly found themselves sold to captains who considered their crews expendable, cargo to be used and discarded. The world was ordered and rigid, and men like him had little hope of climbing its ranks. Once aboard a merchantman or man of war, he would discover that his captain's word was law. The articles he might have read before signing on were vague promises. The reality was that a captain could withhold wages, confiscate belongings, and dole out punishments at whim. Flogging with the cat-o'-nine-tails left backs scarred and minds broken. Keel hauling, dragging a man beneath the ship's barnacle-encrusted hull, sometimes killed and always maimed. Desertion was punishable by hanging. Voices were not heard, grievances were not redressed. Above the common sailor were officers born to privilege, and if they were cruel or negligent, there was little recourse. Every morning a man could wake to find himself on short rations because his superior was in a bad mood. Every night he could go to sleep knowing that tomorrow might bring another order to climb wet rigging in a storm that could tear him from the mast and throw him into the cold sea. There was no question of saying no. Food was rarely sustenance so much as survival. Salted beef and pork, grey and brined, sat in barrels leaking their juices into the bilge. Hardtack, dry biscuits as hard as wood, sometimes needed to be softened with water or a hammer. When the hold was full, these provisions might be edible. After a few weeks at sea, they crawled with weevils and maggots. Men would tap their biscuits against the deck to knock out the worms, then eat anyway, grateful for the protein. Water started clean, but soon grew algae and slime. Casks leaked, barrels soured. Sailors learned to mix their water with beer or rum to make the taste bearable, and drunkenness became a way to chase away the taste of rot. Scurvy lurked invisibly, bleeding gums and swelling joints until teeth fell out and bones broke. Fever came with the rats that infested the holds. Dysentery and typhus followed. The stench below decks, a mixture of sweat, bilge, salt pork and human waste, was overpowering. In port, wages were delayed or stolen outright. A man might spend months at sea only to be turned away with pennies. It was not surprising that in every port sailors deserted when they could, taking their chances on land. The sea gave them little, but the land promised nothing more. For those who were pressed into service, the bitterness was even deeper. They had been kidnapped by men who wielded legal authority. They had no say in where they went or how long they stayed. Press gangs combed taverns and alleyways, dragging men onto ships bound for wars they did not understand. Indentured servants were sold across oceans. Enslaved Africans were chained in holds with less space than cargo. The hierarchy on board was as rigid as the one ashore, and it was enforced with violence. When the captain said jump, you jumped or you were whipped. When the captain said you would go hungry, you went hungry and thanked him for not throwing you overboard. Against this backdrop, rumours began to circulate. In taverns where sailors spent their meagre pay, over games of dice and swigs of cheap ale, men spoke in low voices of ships that sailed without king's colours. They spoke of crews that shared equally in plunder, where each man had a voice in decisions, where a captain was elected and could be deposed. They spoke of going on the account, a phrase that promised something more than starvation wages and the lash. Perhaps a man had met someone who had done it. Perhaps he had heard of the Jolly Roger flying off the coast of Jamaica, of sloops that darted in and out of trade routes, striking with speed and then vanishing. Or perhaps he heard stories from men who'd been taken by such ships and given a choice. Sign the articles and join us, or go back to your own captain's authority. For some, the decision was immediate. For others, it came slowly, creeping through nights filled with groaning planks and the snore of the man in the next hammock. It came with the realization that their current life held nothing but endless toil under another's rule. It came with the memory of the press gang's grip on his arms, of the scar on his back from a whip. The seed planted by those rumours sprouted in the salt of his sweat. We speak of those rumours as if they were fantasies, but in truth there were ships where such promises were kept. Pirate crews wrote their own codes, called articles, and before they set sail all who joined signed their name or mark. The articles varied, but they shared certain principles. Each man had one vote in affairs of moment. Plunder would be divided into shares according to risk taken. Certain behaviours such as theft among comrades or desertion during battle were punishable by death or marooning. Captains were elected for their skill and daring, not by the accident of birth. Quartermasters were appointed to protect the crew's rights and divide shares. If a man was injured, he was compensated. A lost arm or leg could mean a payment that allowed him to live ashore. No naval captain offered such security. To a sailor accustomed to arbitrary punishment, the idea of agreeing to rules, of choosing his leaders, of receiving a guaranteed share was revolutionary. The so-called Black Flag promised a kind of freedom that no lawful service did. Consider one particular night, somewhere off the coast of Hispaniola, as a merchantman sails loaded with sugar and rum. Lanterns swing in the rigging, casting long shadows on deck. The mate's voice carries down to men slumped against barrels, eyes half closed, their stomachs full of salted meat and their mouths dry. Suddenly another ship appears in the darkness, cutting across the moonlit water with quiet precision. Before the merchantman can react, grappling hooks fly, boards collide. Men wearing sashes of crimson and pistols at their belts swarm aboard. They shout, but their eyes are not wild. They hold a document and they speak in measured tones. You have a choice, they say. Join us and you will be free of your captain's lash. You will have a vote, you will have a share, or refuse, and we will set you adrift to find your way back if you can. The merchantmen look at each other. They think of the flogging they endured last week, the pay withheld last month. They think of the captain asleep in his cabin while they starve. They think of the stories they have heard in taverns. Slowly, hands reach out to take the articles. Slowly, some sign. The faces around the table are not all white. There are Spaniards and Irishmen, a Dutchman who once served on a whaler, a man from the Gold Coast who escaped bondage when pirates attacked the slaver that had shackled him. There is a man with a scar down his cheek and a ring through his ear who claims he was once a cooper in Bristol. They speak in a dozen accents, and sometimes they do not understand each other's words, but they share the same weathered hands and weary eyes. They have all been hungry, they have all been beaten, they have all stared at the same grey horizon and dreamed of something else. On a lawful vessel they might have remained strangers. On a pirate ship they become comrades. The choice to join was not taken lightly. Law and religion condemned piracy. Governments promised death for those caught with black flags. Churches preached of hellfire. Families might never see their sons again. Some men weighed the possibilities carefully and decided to keep their heads down where they were. Others could not bear another day under an autocratic captain. For those who chose to sign, there was a strange exhilaration in the act. It meant stepping outside the bounds of nations and kings, stepping into a community forged by necessity and desire. It meant trusting men you had just met. It meant embracing the possibility of being hunted by navies and hung in cages. Yet it also meant your voice mattered. Your labour earned a fair share. Your injuries would not leave you penniless. It meant that your destiny was yours to shape, for as long as the wind filled your sails and your ship stayed afloat. We imagine the moment the articles were read and agreed upon. The men gather on deck, lantern light flickering on their faces. The parchment is unrolled. The quartermaster reads slowly, his voice carrying over the slap of waves. Every man shall have an equal vote in affairs of moment. There is a murmur as men look at each other, hardly believing. Every man shall have an equal share of the fresh provisions or strong liquors at any time seized, and shall use them at pleasure unless a scarcity makes it necessary to vote a retrenchment. Heads nod. Men remember nights when their officers ate better than they did while claiming there was not enough to go around. If any man should desert or keep any secret from the company, he shall be marooned or suffer death. There is a seriousness now. Freedom comes with responsibility. No man shall game at cards or dice for money. Laughter at that one. Men consider their good luck at dice in the past. If any man should lose a limb, he shall receive $800 out of the public stock. Eyes widen. $800 could buy a cottage, a future. The articles go on, each clause carefully designed to prevent the abuses they have suffered. When the reading is finished, the men step forward to place their mark. Some cannot write, so they scratch an X. Others sign their names with flourishes, savouring the moment of choice. All of this happens under the watchful gaze of the horizon. They know what they're doing is illegal. They know that the governments they forsake will send ships to hunt them. They know that when they next make landfall, they might see bodies of pirates swinging in chains as a warning. Yet they also know that their life expectancy on a legal ship is not much better. Scurvy and disease, storms and battle could kill them as surely as a gallows. At least now they can decide when to fight and when to flee. At least now, when they risk their lives, the reward will not go into an admiral's pocket but into their own. They weigh the risks against the misery they leave behind, and many decide that the black flag, for all its danger, offers a more honest bargain. As we listen to these men make their choices, we cannot help but wonder what we would have done had we been born into their world. Would we have accepted our lot, bowed our heads, and hoped for better treatment? Or would we have slipped away in the night, hidden in the shadow of a sail, clutching a small sack of belongings and a hope for something more? There is no way to know. It is easy to condemn or romanticize from our distance. It is harder to feel the raw desperation that pushed a man to risk the gallows, rather than endure another day of hunger and humiliation. It is harder to imagine the thrill and terror of raising a black flag and stepping outside the law, perhaps forever. The call of the sea is complicated. For some, it was the promise of gold and glory, the allure of easy riches. For others, it was simply the promise of respect and autonomy, values denied them by the societies they served. The men who chose piracy were not saints, nor were they always villains. They were humans seeking a measure of control over their own lives. When we stand on that shore and feel the mist on our face and hear the distant whisper of waves, perhaps we can understand why someone would answer that call. It spoke of risk and blood and hardship, yes, but also of possibility. It offered a chance to rewrite one's fate with one's own hand. It promised that for a time, however short, a man could stand on the deck of a ship and feel the wind in his hair and know that he lived by rules he had helped create. As this chapter draws to a close, we leave our newly minted pirates watching the horizon, their hands still stained with ink from signing the articles. The ship creaks gently beneath their feet. The sun is rising now, casting a pink glow on the clouds. Seagulls circle above. The wind shifts, filling the sails. Somewhere out there is their first prize. Somewhere out there are navies waiting to chase them. Somewhere out there a life unbound by monarchs and merchants is about to begin. The choices they have made will carry them into storms and battles, hunger and camaraderie. It will bring them laughter and horror. It will make their names legends or condemn them to anonymous graves. But for this one moment, as the black flag unfurls and catches the morning light, all they feel is the thrill of freedom and the weight of responsibility they have chosen together. They do not know what will come. They only know that they have answered the call of the sea and there is no turning back. What does it sound like when a dozen languages echo across a single deck? Not a cacophony, but a weaving of threads. Irish brogue and Spanish murmur, African dialect and Dutch guttural syllables, each voice rising and falling in rhythm with the others. At night, when the watch is set and the ship rocks gently under a clear sky, these voices tell stories. They whisper memories of green hills and red earth, of streets lined with merchants, of rivers that run muddy or clear, of songs their mothers sang. They laugh at different jokes but laugh together. They do not always understand the words, but the tone is enough. In this floating world, differences that would divide on land blur into the shared tasks of survival. The sea has a way of erasing boundaries and drawing new lines. Brotherhood is not the absence of difference. It is the weaving of it into something strong enough to withstand storm and sword. Aboard a pirate ship in the late 17th century, the crew came from everywhere. Some were former Royal Navy sailors who had tired of the lash. Some were fishermen who had lost their nets and found only debt at home. Others were escaped slaves, their wrists still marked by irons, now free to grasp rope and oar as equals. There were Frenchmen, Portuguese, indigenous Caribbeans, and the odd Swede or German. They were young and old, some boys with peach fuzz on their chins, others with weathered faces and white beards. Women were almost entirely absent, not by choice but by rule and custom. When they did appear, they proved as capable and fierce as any man. These differences could have sown resentment. Yet the very act of stepping aboard as pirates required an abandonment of the hierarchies that defined the outside world. The monarch's law no longer held, only the articles and the collective will did. We can imagine the scene on deck just after sunrise. The air is thick with humidity. Sweat beads on brows and drips down backs as bodies move in practiced unison. One crew member hauls on a line with the Scottish curses, another passes a bucket while humming a Yoruba lullaby. A Spaniard with a silver hoop in his ear grins at a Jamaican crewmate as they lift a cast together. They joke about their former captains in broken patois and laugh at the memory of a particularly ridiculous officer's powdered wig falling into the sea. There is warmth here, a camaraderie born of shared grievance and mutual dependence. Each man knows that his life quite literally depends on the man beside him. When the storm comes, when the guns fire, they must move as one. Among these men, there were those for whom the pirate deck was the first space they had ever felt like equals. The historian Kenneth Kincaid noted that in no surviving pirate articles were there rules forbidding black crewmen from carrying weapons. While some historians argue that black pirates were relegated to menial tasks, others contend they stood shoulder to shoulder with white pirates as fighters, sharers of plunder, and members of the crew's council. On many ships, when a prize was taken, and the captured men were offered a choice to join, enslaved Africans were freed and invited to sign the articles. Those who accepted found themselves with the right to vote and a share in the booty. It was a radical equality seldom seen on shore, where laws codified racial hierarchies and bondage. Here, value was measured in courage, skill, and contribution to the crew, not in skin colour. The crew's unity was reinforced by the articles that bound them. When a pirate ship formed, the articles were read aloud and agreed upon. They addressed behaviour, but also compensation and support. If any man shall lose a limb or become disabled in the service of the ship, he shall receive $800 out of the public stock, one set of articles stipulated. In a world with no social safety net, this promise meant that the crew would care for its wounded. The article did not say, if any white man, or if any officer, but any man. It was a pact to look after one another. Similarly, the division of plunder, 2 shares to the captain, 2 to the quartermaster, 1.5 to other officers, and 1 to each crew member, underscored the idea that everyone's labour had value. No one left empty-handed. The quartermaster, elected as the crew's advocate, ensured the captain did not abuse his position. If he did, the crew could vote him out. In societies defined by monarchs and lords, this was extraordinary. It made men who had lived under tyranny feel, perhaps for the first time, that their voice mattered. Cultural differences often manifested in music and ritual. Songs were essential to work, timing the hauling of lines and lifting of anchors. Each group brought its own repertoire. A West African call and response might morph into an Irish ballad as voices joined and layered. Drumming on empty barrels created rhythms that echoed across the water. In calmer moments, the crew might share dances on the main deck, stomping their bare feet and clapping their hands, the sound carrying over the waves. These communal actions built bonds where words might fail. They were also a way of preserving identity. To sing one's mother's song in the midst of strangers was to reclaim a piece of oneself in a world where everything else was new and precarious. Language itself became a patchwork. Pidgin tongues developed, blending English, French, Spanish, and African languages. Simple phrases sufficed to communicate basic tasks: pull, hold, carry, stop. Hand signals and gestures filled gaps. Over time, words from one language slipped into another. A Frenchman might curse in Wolof without realizing. This linguistic melding created a sense of shared belonging. It also meant that ideas traveled quickly. A story told in one language could be retold in another moments later, spreading across the deck. Gossip about a captain's mistake, rumours of rich prizes, tales of legendary pirates like Blackbeard or Henry Every, all circulated in this babble, keeping morale up and reinforcing a collective narrative. Pirates knew they were part of something larger than themselves, a brotherhood with its own law. Trust, however, did not come automatically. Many pirates had backgrounds that taught them to be wary. They had been betrayed by officers, sold by owners, hunted by men of law. The first weeks aboard could be tense. New recruits were watched closely. Would they steal a comrade's food? Would they hesitate in battle? Would they speak too freely in taverns when ashore? One way trust was tested was through sharing work and risk. If a man pulled his weight, if he climbed out to reef the sails in a storm, if he stood firm at the rail when grappling lines were thrown, he earned respect. Another way was through the sharing of spoils. When the first chest of gold was opened and divided according to the articles, and each man saw he received his promised share, suspicion eased. The quartermaster's role as arbiter of disputes was crucial. When grievances arose over a missing knife, a perceived slight, or a broken promise, the quartermaster mediated, ensuring fairness. In this way, conflicts did not fester. Anger could be vented, and then the crew moved on. Stories abound of crews voting to replace captains they considered unjust. Captain Charles Vane, for instance, was deposed when he refused to engage a French warship. His crew felt he lacked nerve. They elected John Calico Jack Rackham in his place, demonstrating the crew's power to enforce their values. In such moments, differences of nationality and race mattered less than shared expectations. The crew desired boldness in battle, fairness in division, and respect for the articles. When a leader failed to embody these, he was ousted. The vote was often taken with a show of hands. Sometimes it was as simple as men turning their backs on the old captain and facing the new. The act was both practical and symbolic. It affirmed that the ship belonged to its crew, not to any crown or individual. It also reminded each man that he too could be called to account by his fellows. There were, of course, darker aspects to this brotherhood. The articles that bound pirates to one another also drew clear lines against outsiders. Captured crews who refused to join could be killed or marooned. Merchantmen were stripped of cargo, their passengers often robbed of personal belongings. While some pirates famously refused to harm women and insisted on chivalry, others did not. Slave ships captured by pirates sometimes had their human cargo sold rather than freed. The same men who upheld equality aboard their own vessel participated in an economy built on exploitation. These contradictions existed side by side, a reminder that brotherhood had its limits. It extended inward, creating a family of choice, but it could be fiercely hostile outward, especially to those seen as enemies or threats. Yet even within these limits, the idea of brotherhood held power. Picture a night when the ship lies at anchor in a hidden cove. The moon is a sliver above the palms. On shore, a fire crackles and men gather around, passing a bottle of rum. They take turns telling stories. One man talks about a river in Africa filled with hippos. Another describes a winter in Flanders when ice covered the canals. A third tells of his sister's wedding in a Jamaican village. As the night deepens, a quiet settles. Someone begins to hum a hymn. Voices join, low and rough, filling the air. The song is not in any one language. It is a blend. The melody is haunting and beautiful. Men close their eyes. For a moment the hardships of their lives fall away. They are simply humans, lost children of different worlds, finding solace in each other's company. It is in these moments that the bonds of brotherhood form, strong as the ropes that hold the ship together. Another ritual that solidified unity was the division of spoils. After a successful engagement, the captured goods were brought up and catalogued. Gold and silver coins were weighed, jewellery sorted, bolts of cloth unfurled, barrels of sugar and rum stacked. The quartermaster and a small committee assessed the value of each and divided it accordingly. This process was transparent. No man could claim he was cheated. They watched as their share was measured. The smallest errors were caught and corrected. Those who had taken greater risks, boarders who went first into the fray or gunners who took wounds, were publicly acknowledged and given extra. Injuries were examined, and promises of compensation were affirmed. The spectacle of fairness reinforced trust. It also reinforced the idea that every man's contribution had meaning. A powder monkey who carried cartridges counted as much as a master gunner, because without him, the guns would not fire. The mutual acknowledgement created a social glue that bound men who might otherwise have no reason to care about each other. Disputes did arise. Humans cannot live in close quarters without friction. When they occurred, the articles provided mechanisms. If two men quarrelled, they were required to take it ashore and fight a duel under specified rules. The duel was not simply violence, it was ritualized, with seconds and boundaries. It allowed anger to be expended without disrupting the ship's harmony. Once the duel was over, the matter was closed. The participants were expected to shake hands and move on. Theft among crew was punished severely. A man caught stealing from his brother might have his ears or nose cut, then be cast off at the next land. Desertion in battle was treason. The penalty was death. These harsh rules served a purpose. They ensured that in the heat of combat men could rely on one another. They also reinforced the idea that equality and fairness were preserved by collective discipline. The Brotherhood extended beyond the living. Pirates often honoured their dead with simple rites. When a crewman died, whether from battle, disease, or accident, his comrades wrapped him in canvas, weighted his feet with a cannonball, and laid him on a plank across the side. A quiet fell over the deck. The captain or the quartermaster said a few words, perhaps a prayer or a personal memory. Then the plank was tilted and the body slid into the sea. The splash broke the silence. The men stood for a moment, heads bowed. Some whispered a farewell in their own tongue. Others simply watched the ripples fade. They knew that any one of them could be next. Honouring the dead reminded them of their shared fate. In a world where governments hung pirates' bodies at harbour entrances as warnings, the pirates chose to show one another respect in death. It was another form of loyalty. On shore, Pirate Brotherhood took on different forms. When they found temporary havens, whether hidden bays, sympathetic ports, or islands like Nassau during its brief period as a pirate republic, the crews mingled. They traded goods, swapped news, and intermingled in taverns. Friendships formed across ship lines. Romances sometimes bloomed with local women, though such liaisons were fleeting. Disagreements could turn into brawls, but they could also cement alliances. At times, multiple crews agreed to combine forces to take a particularly rich prize, dividing the spoils afterwards. These alliances relied on the same principles: clear terms, shared risks, and adherence to mutually agreed rules. The network of pirate alliances across the Atlantic world was loose but real, and it was underpinned by the concept of fraternity. Without it, individual ships would have been more vulnerable to naval crackdowns. Together they created a shadowy, floating community. We must also consider those who lived at the edges of this brotherhood, women like Anne Bonny and Mary Read, who disguised themselves as men to serve, then revealed themselves and demanded recognition. They challenged assumptions about gender roles. Their presence forced male crew to confront their own biases. Legends say that when their ship was boarded and the male pirates cowered below, it was Bonny and Red who fought, firing pistols and swinging cutlasses until capture was inevitable. When confronted by their captain, Bonny supposedly said she was sorry he was caught, but if he had fought like a man, he need not have been hanged. The story may be embellished, but its essence speaks to the idea that brotherhood was not solely about men. It was about courage and commitment. Those who embodied those values, regardless of gender, deserved respect. As this chapter draws to a close, we listen again to the voices on deck. The day's work is done. The sun has set. The sky is scattered with stars. A gentle breeze cools sweaty skin. The crew sits in small clusters, sharing pipes and passing a bottle. Someone mentions an upcoming vote about whether to chase a large vessel spotted earlier. A few nod. The Quartermaster will propose it in the morning. Others are lost in thought. The man from Bristol remembers his first day aboard, when he was terrified of being killed by these outlaws, only to be embraced when he proved his worth. The freed African thinks of his family far away and wonders if he will ever see them again, yet he feels more respected here than he ever did under the whip. The Irish boy hums a song his grandmother used to sing. The voices join, soft and low. In this moment, differences melt into harmony. They are brothers in the shadows, bound by choice and necessity, navigating a dangerous, uncertain world together. We leave them there for now, listening to the rhythm of their song, the creak of the mast and the gentle slap of water against the hull. The darkness around them is vast and the future is uncertain. But for tonight, on this piece of wood bobbing on the endless sea, they have each other. The world they left behind is far away. The world ahead is unknown. Between those two they have created something of their own. It is fragile and fraught with contradictions, but it is theirs. And for men who have known nothing but the rule of others, that is no small thing. Power aboard a ship is a strange thing. On land, titles and lineage announce authority long before words are spoken. A man in a powdered wig struts through streets and is bowed to. His status is obvious. At sea, under a sky that looks down without regard for family or fortune, authority comes from other sources. It comes from skill, knowing when to reef a sail just before the wind snaps it. It comes from courage, standing at the rail when cannonballs fly. It comes from the quiet respect earned in long nights of shared danger. On a pirate ship where no monarch's law applies, power is even more peculiar. It is given and taken by vote. It rests on the trust of men who have chosen to become outlaws together. It can vanish in the time it takes to raise a hand. Imagine the first days after a crew has signed their articles and set sail. The ship moves steadily, sails full, water hissing along the hull. A man stands at the helm, his hand on the spokes of the wheel. His eyes are on the horizon, reading wind and cloud. This man is the captain. He did not inherit his title. He earned it through deeds and the willingness of those around him to follow. He is not addressed as my lord or sir. He may be called by his name, often a nickname. Black Sam, Long Ben, Calico Jack. The crew watches him. They measure his decisions. They assess whether he is cautious or bold, fair or self-serving. They know that if he falters, they have the power to replace him. This is a heavy mantle to wear, heavier perhaps than a crown that cannot easily be removed. The captain's primary role is to lead in battle. When a target is sighted, a fat merchantman heavy with sugar, a slaver loaded with human cargo, a sloop carrying mail and coins, the captain decides how to engage. He chooses the angle of approach, the moment to raise the black flag, the instant to fire the first shot. His voice cuts through the chaos, giving commands that must be obeyed without question. In these moments, there is no time for debate. Lives and loot depend on quick, decisive action. A hesitant captain can doom the crew. So too can a reckless one. The crew expects a balance, bravery tempered by judgment. If the captain orders an attack that seems foolish, men will mutter. If he continues making poor calls, they will do more than mutter. When battle is over and the adrenaline has ebbed, the captain's authority recedes. He becomes another member of the company, subject to the same rules and the same ration of rum. At meal times, he sits alongside his crew and eats the same salted meat and hardtack. His share of plunder may be larger, but his portion of food is the same. In the cramped quarters below deck, he sleeps in no greater comfort. He does not live in opulent cabins with silk sheets like a naval admiral. On some ships he may have a small private cabin, but this privilege is limited. The articles stipulate as much. They're designed to prevent the growth of privilege that so rankles sailors on lawful ships. The captain is first among equals, not above them. Beside him is the quartermaster, a figure less well known in popular tales but arguably more important in daily life. The quartermaster is elected by the crew to represent their interests. He is the keeper of the articles, the judge of small disputes, the distributor of rations, the overseer of discipline, and the controller of plunder. He has the authority to punish minor offences up to a certain point. If a man steals from his mate, the quartermaster may order his ears cut. If two men fight, he separates them and schedules their duel ashore. He keeps the ship's accounts, noting each share owed, each injury paid. He is the crew's shield against a tyrannical captain. Should the captain order something that contravenes the articles, the quartermaster can countermand him. He is often the older, steadier member of the crew, someone with experience and a reputation for fairness. His authority extends beyond punishment. He is the one who decides what plunder to take from a captured ship and what to leave. He is, in many ways, the heartbeat of the ship. The relationship between captain and quartermaster is delicate. They must trust and respect one another. The captain cannot become too autocratic. The quartermaster cannot undercut the captain's battle commands. When it works, the ship hums along like a well-oiled machine. When it falters, tensions simmer. There have been ships where the captain and quartermaster openly disliked one another. In such cases, the crew must choose sides. Sometimes they choose neither. They vote both out and elect new leaders. This is governance by consensus in its rawest form. It can be chaotic, but it ensures that power remains responsive to the people it governs. Consider the story of Captain Charles Vane, who commanded a fleet of pirate ships in the early 1710s. Vane was known for his brutality and his caution. When he encountered a French warship that he deemed too powerful to engage, he ordered a retreat. His quartermaster, Calico Jack Rackham, and many of the crew disagreed. They felt Vane was wasting an opportunity. In a meeting held on deck, under a sky streaked with sunset, voices rose. Vane insisted he was protecting his men. Others accused him of cowardice. The quartermaster called for a vote. It was swift. The majority turned their backs on Vane and declared Rackham their new captain. Vane was given a small sloop and sent away. The crew's decision was final. In that moment, the abstract principles of the articles were tested and upheld. No matter Vane's past successes, the crew judged him on his current actions. His authority existed only as long as he had their confidence. Another tale tells of a captain who abused his power in more subtle ways. He took the best cuts of meat for himself. He hoarded sugar and rum. He favoured certain crew members, giving them extra shares. Whispers spread. The quartermaster tried to address it quietly, but the captain laughed and waved him off. The crew watched their leader become a small tyrant. One night, under a sliver of moon, a meeting was called. Men gathered on the main deck, lanterns hanging from the rail. The articles were read aloud. The crew reminded the captain of his promises. He tried to bluster. "I am captain," he said. "I decide." The quartermaster stepped forward. "Not here," he replied. "Not according to our articles." Hands were raised. The captain was deposed. He was not killed. Pirates rarely murdered their own. He was put ashore at the next uninhabited island with a bottle of water and a pistol. The ship sailed on with a new leader who understood that authority on a pirate vessel came with responsibilities. While the captain and quartermaster were the most visible roles, the governance structure extended to the entire crew. Many decisions were put to a vote. Whether to attack a ship, which course to set, how to respond to a navy vessel in pursuit, these were matters of moment, and every man had a voice. Meetings were informal yet orderly. The quartermaster or captain would propose a course of action. Men would murmur, discuss in small groups. Then they would vote. Sometimes it was a show of hands. Other times it was a physical act like turning one's back to the captain to show opposition. The process was simple but significant. It gave agency to men who'd been denied it their whole lives. It created buy-in. When a vote passed, even those who disagreed were more likely to follow, because the decision was legitimate. On a lawful ship, a sailor might grumble at orders he deemed foolish, and even subtly sabotage them. On a pirate ship, because he'd had a chance to speak, he was more likely to comply, even if reluctantly. Democracy did not guarantee unanimity, but it fostered commitment. The idea of democratic governance at sea has fascinated scholars. It seems an anomaly in an age of absolute monarchies and rigid hierarchies. Yet pirate democracies were practical. They were solutions to specific problems. One such problem was the threat of a predatory captain. Men who had served under abusive officers did not want to trade one tyrant for another. By diffusing power, pirates created a system of checks and balances. Another problem was the need for coordination. Piracy required cooperation. Manning sails, loading guns, boarding enemy vessels. Coerced labour is less efficient than voluntary labour. A crew that feels invested in its mission works harder. Democracy also helped manage the risk of mutiny. Since men could remove a captain through a vote, they were less likely to resort to violence. They had a non-violent avenue for expressing dissatisfaction. In a strange way, pirate governance promoted stability in an inherently unstable enterprise. It is easy to romanticize this democracy. We must remember that it existed within a context of violence and theft. The same men who voted on how to share plunder also voted to attack and rob ships. Their rights did not extend to those they preyed upon. The captain's authority in battle could mean life or death for merchant sailors. But within the closed system of the pirate crew, the principles of participation and accountability were real and meaningful. They mitigated the worst abuses common on lawful ships. They offered a measure of dignity to men who'd been treated as expendable. It is easy to romanticize this democracy. We must remember that it existed within a context of violence and theft. The same men who voted on how to share plunder also voted to attack and rob ships. Their rights did not extend to those they preyed upon. The captain's authority in battle could mean life or death for merchant sailors. But within the closed system of the pirate crew, the principles of participation and accountability were real and meaningful. They mitigated the worst abuses common on lawful ships. They offered a measure of dignity to men who'd been treated as expendable. Dawn arrives quietly at sea, not as a blaze of light, but as a gradual lifting of darkness. First, the stars fade in the east, and a faint band of grey appears along the horizon. The sea is a mirror, only slightly rippling with swells that have travelled thousands of miles. The air is cool, almost cold, laden with the scent of salt and seaweed. On a pirate ship, this liminal moment is not spent in sleep. It is the beginning of a day's work. The bells have been struck. The watch changes. Men stir in their hammocks, rubbing bleary eyes, swinging their legs down to the deck's damp planks. They yawn and mutter, feeling the sway of the ship beneath them. Outside, gulls begin to cry, wheeling above the mast. The day will be long. The first tasks of the morning are simple and repetitive. Sweeping and scrubbing the deck are among them. Salt spray and tar and the grit of yesterday's work have left the planks sticky and dirty. Buckets are pulled up from the hold, water sloshing. Brushes made of bound rope fibres scrape against wood. The sound is rhythmic. Swish, scrape, splash. Men lean into it, muscles warmed by the effort. Their feet are bare, toes gripping the wet deck. Around them, others coil ropes, neatly looping thick hemp lines so that they will not trip someone later. Still others begin to check the rigging, hand over hand along the rope, feeling for frayed strands that must be spliced before they snap. The atmosphere is one of quiet concentration. It is not glamorous, but it is essential. A neglected deck becomes slippery and dangerous. A frayed rope can cost a sail at the worst possible moment. The chores are a form of care for the ship that carries them, almost a ritual. As the sun lifts further, turning the grey band into gold, the crew breaks for a simple breakfast. The smell of boiling oatmeal drifts up from the galley. A small space near the hold where the cook has been up before everyone else, tending to his cauldron. He spoons the thick gruel into wooden bowls. Sometimes there is a bit of sugar if it was captured as part of plunder. Sometimes there is none. Hardtack biscuits are passed around. Men crack them against the table to dislodge any pests, then dunk them into the hot oats to soften. Eating is quick. There is no lingering over conversation. Food is fuel, not pleasure. The cook, often an older or injured sailor, has his own corner of authority. He manages the limited stores, knows when the salted meat is starting to sour and when the cheese should be eaten before it moulds. He deals with the galley fire, carefully dampening it when the wind picks up to prevent sparks. After breakfast, watches are assigned. A ship needs constant vigilance. The lookout climbs to the crow's nest, a small platform near the top of the mainmast. He grips the rope ladder, his bare feet finding each knotted rung. The wind is stronger up there, and the ship's motion is exaggerated. Once at the top, he ties himself off and peers across the endless expanse of water. His eyes scan for sails, white or tan triangles against the blue, for plumes of smoke that might indicate a warship, for discolorations that could be reefs or floating debris. He will remain aloft for hours, his stomach lurching with every sway, his only companion the wind and his thoughts. On deck, another man takes the helm, feeling the resistance of the wheel as the rudder bites into the sea. He keeps a steady course, aligning the bow with a point on the horizon, adjusting for currents and gusts. Beside him, the sailing master consults the compass and the charts, marking their position, measuring their speed with the log and line, noting the time on the sand glass. Meanwhile, in the rigging, a group of sailors climbs out along the yards. They move with a cat-like grace, arms and legs wrapping around the ropes, bodies swaying with the mast. Their job is to check the sails for tiers, to reef them if the wind freshens, or to set more canvas if the wind slackens. Each man knows his knot, his rope, his piece of canvas. They have names for every line: halyard, sheet, brace. This language is a vocabulary of survival. A misunderstanding can mean a sail flapping uselessly or worse, tearing. Their hands are calloused and rope-burned. They shout to each other, but above the noise of wind and water their voices are lost. Gestures suffice. Below, the boatswain watches, ready to shout if he sees a mistake. He takes pride in a well-ordered ship. He expects obedience, but also teaches patiently. He knows that a green hand must be taught how to splice rope, how to tie a bowline, how to belay a line properly. If knowledge is not passed down, the ship is in danger. One of the less glamorous but vital tasks is the pumping of the bilge. All wooden ships leak, if only a little. Water seeps between planks around the seams. Rain runs down the masts and into the hold. Waves that break over the bow spill down hatches. The bilge, the lowest part of the ship, collects this water along with spilled oil, fermenting food, and the excretions of animals kept on board for meat. It becomes a foul, sloshing stew. If it rises too high, it can threaten the ship's stability or ruin cargo. The bilge pumps, long wooden contraptions worked by hand, are manned in shifts. Men take turns pushing and pulling the handles, forcing water up through pipes and out scuppers in the side. The smell is overpowering. It is the smell of rot and waste and mould. Those at the pump often gag, but if they falter, the bilge water rises. When they finish, they wipe their faces on their sleeves, spat out the taste, and return to other chores. No one thanks them. It is just part of the day. In the afternoon, work continues with maintenance and repair. A carpenter may be called to inspect the hull. He drops a lead line over the side to measure the water depth, then taps along the inside of the hull, listening for hollow sounds that indicate rot or wormholes. If he finds a weakness, he fashions a patch from timber stored for such emergencies. He wedges it in place, seals it with tar and oakum. Nearby, a cooper repairs casks. He shapes staves with an adze, bends them with heat, then hammers iron hoops to hold them tight. Without sound casks, water and rum and gunpowder will spoil. The sailmaker patches canvas, sitting cross-legged with a palm pad and needle, drawing the thread through thick fabric, pulling it taut. His hands are rough, pricked by needles. He works steadily, knowing a sail must hold when wind or battle tears at it. Below deck, the blacksmith shapes iron, making nails and bolts, straightening bent hooks. Each man focuses on his craft, his face set with concentration. Not all tasks are purely functional. There's also time for cleaning guns and weapons. The gunners open the lids of their powder barrels and sniff. Damp powder can be fatal, the difference between a booming cannon and a dud. They sift it, removing clumps, then seal the lids tightly. They check the gun carriages, ensuring the wheels turn, the ropes that restrain recoil are not frayed. They clean cannon barrels, running oiled rags down their lengths, feeling for pits that could cause an explosion. Pistols are disassembled, oiled, reassembled. Cutlasses are sharpened with whetstones, the sound a steady scrape. Powder monkeys, often boys as young as 10 or 12, sit nearby, watching, learning. They will be expected to carry powder charges during battle, running from the magazine to the guns under fire, nimble and quick. For now, they practice moving in and out of tight spaces, memorize the layout of the ship, listen to the gunners' stories. Training is ongoing. Everyone must be prepared, as battles can come without warning. As the day advances, the sun climbs high, heat beating down on uncovered heads. Sweat soaks shirts, hands blister. Thirst becomes a constant companion. The ration of water is limited. Men drink their allotted amount slowly, savouring each swallow. Sometimes they dip their tin cups into the bucket of watered-down rum, taking long gulps, wiping their mouths with the back of their hand. They talk quietly as they drink. Conversations are about home. What memories remain? What debts still unpaid? Sometimes they talk about the prizes they hope to capture. Someone mentions that in 2 weeks they should reach the area where Spanish galleons pass laden with silver. eyes brighten at the thought. Someone else mentions a rumour of a Navy frigate patrolling nearby waters. That brings a different look, a tightening of jaws, a glance upward. The routine goes on, but danger is always a presence. It hovers like a distant storm cloud, visible but far enough away to ignore for the moment. Towards evening, the light softens. The harshness of midday glare gives way to golden hues. Shadows lengthen across the deck. Muscles ache with the day's work. Shirts cling to backs. Men pause to stretch, to roll their shoulders, to crack stiff joints. The boatswain checks the rigging one last time. The sailmaker gathers his tools. The cooper stows his hammers and adze. The carpenter wipes his hands on his trousers. The gunners cover their cannons with tarpaulins. The cook begins again, preparing the evening meal. If the day's catch was good, there might be fresh fish to fry. If not, salted meat again. He chops onions and garlic if they have them, mixes them with whatever meat remains, adds herbs if they have any, and cooks it all in a pot. The smell of frying fish or simmering stew drifts along the deck, mingling with the scent of tar and sweat. It is a small pleasure at the end of a hard day. As they eat, conversation flows more freely. Stories are told. Someone recounts a narrow escape from a storm off the Cape of Good Hope. Another remembers a battle where they nearly ran out of powder. Laughter erupts at a joke about a parson who mistook a pirate's ship for a merchantman and was terrified when he found out the truth. Bits of song are sung between mouthfuls. Sometimes someone produces a fiddle or a flute from a chest and plays a tune. The music is simple, but it fills the air. Feet tap, hands clap. For a moment the day's aches are forgotten. There is a sense of community. The ship feels like a small world unto itself, afloat on a vast emptiness. The men look up at the sky, now streaked with pink and purple. The rigging creates a web of lines silhouetted against the light. It is beautiful in a way that takes them by surprise. The sea, their workplace and battlefield, is also their home. As twilight deepens, duties shift. The night watch is set. Those assigned to it will stay awake, eyes strained to detect any sign of danger. They wrap their coats tighter against the cooling air. They pace the deck, stopping occasionally to peer into the blackness. They listen for changes in the wind, the sound of another ship's bow cutting through water, the distant boom of cannons. Below, the off-watch stretches out in hammocks. The gentle rocking of the ship lulls them. They dream of land, of the taste of fresh fruit, of lovers' faces, of childhood streams. Some dream of the last battle, others of battles to come. Dreams mix with the creak of wood and the slap of waves. Rats scurry in the hold, their scratching a familiar, almost comforting noise. Throughout the night the routine continues. Bells mark the passing hours. The sand glass is turned. Time at sea is measured in these small increments. There is no clock ticking, only the sense of a cycle repeating. Work is punctuated by watch changes. At some point the cook wakes again to prepare breakfast. The cycle begins anew. Each day is similar, and yet each is slightly different. The wind changes. The sea's mood shifts. The crew grows tired or restless. A sail might appear on the horizon, snapping the routine into heightened awareness. But most days are spent like this, laborious, repetitive, filled with tasks that keep the ship afloat and the men alive. Battles are dramatic, but rare. What fills the majority of a pirate's life is work. Work is often mundane, but meaning is found in it. The repetitive motions create a rhythm that matches the sea. The tasks connect the men to their vessel. They know every inch of it. The way one plank creaks, the way a certain line frays. the smell of the galley when the wind blows from a particular direction. They take pride in their skills. A sail patched well can withstand a storm. A cask repaired well keeps water fresh. A cannon cleaned properly fires true. These acts of maintenance are acts of love in a sense, for without the ship they would be adrift, quite literally. In caring for the ship, they care for themselves. There is also pride in efficiency, to reef a sail quickly, to pump the bilge until it squeaks, to splice rope without fumbling. These are small achievements that feel good. They are proof that one belongs, that one is competent, that one is part of the crew. We might think that pirates spent their days plotting raids and counting coins. The reality is that most days did not involve plunder at all. They involved bracing against wind and sun, sweating over rope and wood, scraping, mending, cooking, cleaning. The glamour was rare, the grind was constant. Yet many preferred this grind to the grind of lawful ships because it came with respect. On a naval vessel, a man might scrub the deck under the eye of a sneering officer. Here, he scrubs for his comrades. On a merchantman, he might pump the bilge while being denied his wages. Here, his labour contributes to a prize he will share. The chores are the same, but the context changes everything. There is dignity in the work because there is dignity in the worker. As the chapter closes, we find ourselves back at dawn. The cycle has completed. The sky lightens, the stars blink out, gulls cry, men rise from their hammocks, they stretch, rub their eyes, and begin again. There is comfort in the routine, even as it is tiring. It grounds them, it prepares them. For they know that at any moment the routine could be disrupted by the cry of sail ho or the crack of thunder. They live in this tension between the mundane and the extraordinary. They accept it. The day's work is both a necessity and a meditation. Each stroke of a brush, each knot tied, is a prayer of sorts, to the ship, to the sea, to the uncertain future. We leave them to their chores, to the smell of tar and salt, to the rhythm of their work. We let the day unfold, knowing that behind every dramatic tale of piracy lies this quieter story of daily labour, of hands hardened by rope and hearts steadied by routine. Food is memory. The taste of bread can carry a man back to a kitchen table where his mother kneaded dough. The smell of stew can conjure a winter night with siblings gathered around the hearth. At sea, where the world narrows to wood and water, food is also survival. A pirate's diet was shaped by necessity, by the limitations of storage, by the unpredictability of voyage lengths. It tells a story of hardship and occasional abundance, of ingenuity and resignation. To understand what filled their bellies is to understand another layer of their lives. Imagine the ship's hold before setting sail, filled with barrels and sacks. There are casks of salted beef and pork, the meat packed in brine that seeps out between the staves. There are sacks of dried beans and peas, hard as pebbles until soaked. There are wheels of cheese coated in wax. There are kegs of beer and rum, sweet and strong. There are barrels of water, freshly drawn, clear and cold. There might be a few boxes of dried fruit if the previous prize yielded such luxuries. There could be some fresh produce quickly disappearing, onions, garlic, cabbages. There might be live chickens clucking and scratching in crates, and a pig or two snuffling in the corner. These stores represent the crew's hope that they will not starve. They also represent the beginning of a countdown, for everything spoils eventually. The first days at sea are a time of comparative plenty. Meals might include fried pork, eggs from the chickens and soft bread if flour and yeast were available. The cook, who often has only one small stove to work with, makes the most of it. He might stew beans with pieces of salted meat, adding onions for flavour. He might serve cheese in slices accompanied by dried fruit. There is even water to drink that does not taste like the barrel in which it was stored. Spirits are plentiful. The mood is good. Men joke that they have eaten better in the last 2 days than in their last 2 months on a merchantman. But they know it will not last. The fresh meat will be consumed. The eggs will be eaten or spoil. The bread will mould. And then the long stretch will begin. When the fresh provisions are gone, salted meat becomes the main protein. Salting was the primary method of preservation. The process draws moisture out of the meat, inhibiting bacterial growth. It also turns it tough and extremely salty. Before it can be eaten, it must be soaked. Barrels of water are precious, so the cook often boils the meat first, then uses the resulting broth to cook peas or oatmeal, not wasting the salt-rich liquid. Even then, the meat is chewy, fibrous, and tastes overwhelmingly of salt. To vary the flavour, the cook adds spices captured from prizes: pepper, cloves, cinnamon. He uses garlic and onions as long as they last. These efforts, though small, are appreciated. A mouthful of spiced stew is better than pure salt. Hardtack, also known as ship's biscuit, accompanies every meal. It is made of flour and water, baked until dry and hard. It can last for months, but it is so hard that teeth sometimes crack biting into it. Men soften it by dunking it in broth or ale. They knock it on the table first to dislodge weevils. The weevils are tiny and numerous. They can be flicked away or eaten for extra protein. Water poses a particular problem. Stored in wooden casks, it quickly turns stale. The taste becomes musty. Algae and bacteria grow. Worms sometimes appear. Men who have no choice drink it anyway, gagging at the taste. To make it more palatable and safer, they often mix it with spirits. Rum, in particular, becomes a staple. A diluted mixture of rum, water, and sometimes sugar or lime, known as grog, hydrates and makes the water taste better. It also dulls anxiety and hunger. Beer serves a similar function, though it spoils faster. Excessive drinking can lead to drunkenness, but given the dangers of dehydration, spirits are sometimes a lesser evil. Coffee and tea are rare on pirate ships. When present, they are prized. They warm cold nights and remind men of a land. As weeks pass, even the salted meat begins to spoil. Barrels develop leaks, brine is lost, meat at the top dries out and grows mould. The cook cuts away the worst parts, sniffs pieces, judges by eye and nose. Spices become more important. He uses hot peppers to mask the taste of decay. He smokes meat over the galley fire, not for preservation, there isn't time, but to add flavour. Sometimes he throws a portion of the spoiled meat overboard, watching it disappear into the waves. It is a painful decision. Waste is dangerous. Rations are calculated. Throwing away food feels like inviting famine, but feeding the crew meat that causes sickness is worse. He balances these risks, making choices that affect everyone's health. There are moments when monotony is broken. A prize laden with provisions is captured. The crew boards, rifles through the cargo and finds barrels of flour, sacks of sugar, jars of honey, wheels of soft cheese, baskets of oranges and lemons, bags of rice. Their eyes widen. They shout with excitement. They laugh. They gorge themselves. Oranges are eaten first, juices running down beards. They remember the taste of citrus as if tasting sunlight. They know that vitamin C prevents scurvy, even if they don't understand the science. They just know they feel better after citrus. Lemons are squeezed into rum, cheese is cut thick, honey is eaten by the spoonful. For a few days meals are lavish. The cook bakes soft bread. He stews rice in milk and sugar. He makes puddings spiced with cinnamon and cloves. Spirits are high. The monotony of salted meat and hardtack fades for a moment. They talk about this feast for weeks, long after the fresh provisions are gone. Sometimes the sea itself provides. Fish are caught on lines trailed behind the ship. The cook guts and fries them. Their flesh is soft and delicate after so much toughness. Sea turtles, when found, are a delicacy. They are caught and hauled onto the deck, their shells tapping on wood. Their meat is rich, almost sweet, and their eggs are enjoyed by all. A dish called salamagundi becomes a favourite. It is a salad of sorts, a mixture of whatever's available: chopped meat, fish, turtle, pickled vegetables, onions, garlic, olives, herbs, sometimes eggs, all dressed with vinegar and oil. It is fresh and varied. When such meals appear, morale improves. They eat slowly, savouring each bite. They know such variety is rare and will not last, but that knowledge makes the food taste even better. There is also ingenuity in the use of alcohol beyond drinking. Beer is boiled with spices and citrus to create a hot punch on cold nights. Rum is used to clean wounds and to preserve bits of fruit. A sugar syrup might be made and poured over hardtack to create a makeshift dessert. Anything to break the sameness. Men share recipes learned from different ports: a stew from the Caribbean, a bean dish from the Mediterranean, a porridge from Africa. Food becomes a cultural exchange. Underneath the black flag, these culinary mixtures mirror the cultural mixtures among the crew. The flavours are blended, the ingredients improvised. Every meal is an expression of the crew's adaptability and shared identity. Despite these attempts, malnutrition remains a threat. Scurry, the dreaded disease of sailors, creeps in when fresh produce is scarce. Gums become swollen and spongy, teeth loosen, bruises appear, wounds do not heal. Men grow lethargic. They know oranges help, but oranges are not always available. Some chew on grass when it's available on an island, others on pickled cabbage, hoping to stave off illness. They also consume fermented drinks like sauerkraut or kimchi when captured. These contain vitamin C and help. The presence or absence of these foods can mean life or death. The cook watches his crew's gums when they smile. He monitors their energy. He tries to ration citrus if they have any, giving the sick the first portions. He becomes a kind of healer through food, though he has little to work with. We must not forget the element of decay. The hold of a ship is a living organism. Rats and cockroaches inhabit it. They gnaw on sacks, contaminating flour and beans with droppings. They chew holes in barrels. Men set traps. Cats, when present, are valued. The presence of a good mouser can save stores. Sometimes, when hunger is extreme, rats themselves are eaten. It is not pleasant. Their meat is gamey and tough, but hunger dulls aversion. Leather becomes food. Belts and shoes are boiled. Stories circulate of men stewing the soles of their boots. These are not regular occurrences, but they happen when voyages last longer than planned, when storms push the ship off course, when no prize is found. There are also stories of cannibalism in desperate times, whispered with horror. Whether true or exaggerated, they illustrate the fear that hunger could drive men to extremes. The ritual of eating together reinforces bonds. Meals are communal. The crew gathers in small groups on deck or below, sitting cross-legged or leaning against barrels. They eat from common pots, passing bowls, sharing spoons. conversation flows. Grumbling about the food is common, but so is gratitude when it's good. The cook is both teased and praised. He is cursed when the stew is thin and lauded when he produces something unexpected. The act of eating together, of sharing what little there is, fosters solidarity. It also highlights hierarchy when it emerges. If someone tries to take more than his share, he is quickly corrected. Fairness in rations is as important as fairness in plunder. The Quartermaster watches, intervening if necessary. Sometimes he reminds them of the articles which demand that provisions be shared equally. Violations are treated seriously. Food is life, hoarding is betrayal. In port, food is different. When pirates make landfall, one of the first things they do is seek fresh provisions. They spend their shares on bread, fruit, vegetables, meat. They gorge on things they have not tasted in months. Green leafy salads, ripe berries, fresh milk. They drink water that is sweet and clear. They visit taverns and buy stews and pies. They treat themselves. There is joy in the variety. There is also a sense of urgency. They know they will soon be at sea again, returning to salted meat and hardtack. They eat as if storing sensations for future recall. Later, in the middle of the ocean, chewing on tough biscuit, they will remember the taste of a ripe pear eaten under a shade tree, and it will sustain them in a way. Water remains the constant challenge. The science of distilling seawater was known in the 17th century, but the equipment was not always available. Some ships carried an apparatus for boiling seawater and condensing the steam to fresh water. It was labour-intensive and required fuel. Sometimes rain was collected by spreading canvas and directing the flow into barrels. Men would stand in storms, mouths open, catching raindrops. The quartermaster might order the water be rationed, reducing daily allowances. This decision could cause grumbling. Dehydration makes men irritable and less capable. The taste of stale water clings to the tongue. The heat exacerbates it. Drinking rum alleviates the taste but dehydrates further. It is a delicate balance. The ship's cooper and carpenter play roles here. Their ability to keep barrels watertight directly affects how long water remains drinkable. The crew depends on them. We might think that pirates, being criminals, would steal fresh water from coastal communities. They did, on occasion. They also traded for it, exchanging goods or labour. They sometimes captured ships carrying water as cargo. They sometimes pleaded with islanders, using threats or promises. Water procurement was part of the logistics of piracy, just as important as capturing treasure. Without water, men die. They know this intimately. Stories of ships found adrift with entire crews dead of thirst circulate in their world. Those stories haunt them. They make them careful. They make them grateful when rain falls. The sound of rain on canvas becomes music. They tilt their faces up, mouths open, tongues tasting the pure cold drops. Their joy is simple and profound. The chapter of food and drink is, in a sense, the chapter of life. It reminds us that behind every tale of cannons and treasure chests lies the mundane, necessary act of eating. It humanizes the pirates, showing that they, like us, had to manage hunger and thirst, had to find pleasure in small things, had to cope with boredom and monotony. They were not immune to cravings. They longed for fresh bread, for fruit, for a cup of clear water. They also learned to make do with what they had. They used spices to disguise rot. They invented dishes like salamagundi. They caught fish. They chewed tough biscuits and thanked the cook for adding extra onions. They raised a cup of grog and toasted their health. In doing so, They created a shared culture, a culinary tradition that was improvised and humble but meaningful. As this chapter draws to a close, we leave the pirates in the midst of their meal. They eat with their hands, licking fingers, wiping them on trousers. They swallow their grog, feel the warmth of rum spread through their chests. Someone cracks a joke about the everlasting hardtack. Laughter ripples. The sun sets. The cook scours his pots, ready to begin again tomorrow. In the darkness, a man lies back and thinks of the taste of an orange, the sweetness lingering on his tongue. He wonders when he will taste one again. He listens to the creak of the ship, the whisper of the waves and the low murmur of his comrades. Food, like the sea, is an element of their existence. It shapes their days, influences their moods, and binds them together. Without it, there is nothing. With it, there is life, however rough. We leave them there, chewing, swallowing, dreaming of salt and citrus, hunger and satisfaction. The cycle will repeat tomorrow. There will be more biscuits, more salted meat, perhaps another surprise. It is another thread in the tapestry of their journey, a simple, essential thread that glows with its own quiet significance. There is a different world beneath the deck. Above, there is sky and wind and light. Below, there is darkness, dampness, and a smell that never quite leaves your nose. When we descend the ladder into the belly of a 17th century pirate ship, our eyes take a moment to adjust. It is dim. A few lanterns sway, their flames casting flickering yellow light on wooden beams. The air is thick, heavy with humidity and the mingled scents of tar, sweat, bilge water, rotting food and unwashed bodies. The ceiling is low. We have to stoop to avoid hitting our heads. Hammocks hang in rows, close enough that the sleeping bodies sway and occasionally bump each other. Beneath our feet the ship creaks and groans. Water sloshes somewhere below. Welcome to the place where pirates spent half their lives. Below decks. Sleeping arrangements are simple. Each man has a hammock made of canvas or cloth. Hammocks are practical. They swing with the motion of the ship, reducing the chance of being thrown out during rough seas. They also keep bodies off the damp planks where rats and cockroaches scurry. To sleep, a man crawls into his hammock, wraps a blanket around himself if he has one, and tries to ignore the smell and the noises around him. Space is scarce. Hammocks hang close enough that if both men turn at the same time, they might clash. Privacy is non-existent. A man snores loudly beside you. Another mutters in his sleep. Someone passes gas. Someone coughs. Beneath this layer of noise, the ship itself whispers and moans. Sleep comes, but it is light and easily broken. Some men do not have hammocks. They sleep on mats or directly on the floor. They curl up between barrels or against the hull. They feel the cold seeping through the wood, the vibrations of the sea. If it rains, water sometimes trickles down the walls. They wake wet and shivering. Others, injured or sick, lie on makeshift beds near the surgeon's area. The surgeon's corner is a little brighter, not with sunlight, but with candles arranged on a small table. There are saws, knives and bandages hung from hooks. A barrel of rum sits nearby, ready to serve as anesthesia. The surgeon sleeps little. He's called at all hours to tend to cuts, broken bones, infections. He works with what he has, sometimes herbs, sometimes alcohol, often nothing but a steady hand and the willingness to cause pain to prevent worse outcomes. Hygiene is rudimentary. Fresh water is scarce and saved for drinking. Washing is a luxury. When it rains, men strip down and stand on deck, letting the fresh water rinse away salt and sweat. Otherwise, they clean themselves with seawater, which leaves salt residue on their skin. Hair becomes matted, beards grow wild, lice thrive, body odour is strong, clothes, rarely washed, become stiff with salt and grime. Men share clothing as garments wear out. They repair tears with coarse stitches, shoes rot, feet develop sores. Without proper care, small wounds fester, infections spread. There are no showers below deck, no basins of warm soapy water. The idea of personal cleanliness is distant. Survival, not comfort, dictates priorities. The ship is alive with creatures. Rats are constant companions. They scurry across beams, chew through sacks and nibble on sleeping men's toes. They are bold, having little fear of humans. They breed quickly. Cockroaches, shiny and resilient, dart in and out of the cracks. Fleas bite. Mosquitoes, blown on board from tropical coasts, whine in the darkness. Cats are valued for controlling rats, but they cannot eliminate them all. Dogs, sometimes kept for company, or as watch animals, scratch and whine, their fur matted with salt and dirt. These animals are not pets in the modern sense. They are fellow travellers, tolerated because they serve a purpose. They add to the noise and the smell. Diseases flourish in such conditions. Scurvy, caused by a lack of fresh fruit and vegetables, manifests as bleeding gums, loose teeth and swollen limbs. Men become lethargic. Their skin bruises easily. Bones that should be strong become brittle. When scurvy takes hold, wounds do not heal. Infection can set in from the smallest cut. Other diseases are equally feared. Dysentery causes severe diarrhea and dehydration. Typhus arrives with lice, bringing fever, rash and delirium. Malaria and yellow fever are contracted in tropical ports, their symptoms surfacing days or weeks later. Shaking chills, high fever, jaundiced skin. Smallpox occasionally appears, bringing pustules and blindness. Without knowledge of germ theory or effective treatments, pirates rely on experience and superstition. They know that oranges help scurvy, but oranges are rarely available. They might wear charms to ward off illness. They might ask the ship's cook for extra garlic, believing it purifies the blood. These efforts sometimes help, sometimes not. Injuries are common. A fall from the rigging can break bones or snap a neck. A slipped knife can slice deep. Gunpowder misfires, burn skin and destroy hands. During battle, wounds come fast. Cuts from cutlasses, musket balls lodged in flesh, splinters from cannon blasts tearing into limbs. The surgeon must act quickly. There is no anaesthetic but rum or biting down on leather. Amputations are performed with saws. The surgeon ties off the limb with a tourniquet, disinfects his sore in whiskey or salt water, and cuts through skin and bone in as few strokes as possible. He cauterizes the stump with a red-hot iron. The smell of burning flesh fills the small space. Men scream or pass out. Afterwards, the patient is bandaged and given rum. Infection is likely. Some survive. Many do not. The surgeon washes his hands in the same water he uses on tools. There's no understanding of sterilization. His knowledge comes from experience and the occasional medical book. He is part carpenter, part doctor. He does his best. Not all remedies are so drastic. For fever, the surgeon might bleed the patient, believing it releases bad humours. He might administer a purge with herbs, causing vomiting or diarrhea. He might apply poultices of herbs and mud to wounds. He might recommend rest, but rest is hard to come by when the ship demands constant labour. Some men refuse treatment, preferring to let their bodies heal on their own. Others beg for help. The surgeon chooses as best he can. He is not a villain, but a man working within the limits of his era. His success rate is better than nothing, but not by modern standards. The crew respects him because he has their lives in his hands. They also fear him. To combat lice and fleas, Men hold their clothes over flames, hoping the heat will kill the pests. They comb through hair with wooden combs, crushing lice between fingernails. They sprinkle sand on their bodies and rub it in, scraping away dead skin and parasites. They smoke pipes of tobacco, believing the smoke deters insects. They scratch. They try not to think about it. Some cut their hair short, others tie it up. Headscarves become popular, not as fashion but as protection. Hats shield scalps from the sun and from falling debris. Bandanas keep hair out of eyes. The small choices of clothing reflect practical needs. Smell becomes a reality to accept. New recruits often gag the first time they descend below deck. Veterans laugh softly. You get used to it, they say, and in a way they do. The human brain adapts, filters. The strong odours fade into the background. Only occasionally, when the ship is particularly still and the air thick, does the smell become overwhelming. Then men might climb up to the deck for a breath of fresh air, gulping it down as if they are thirsty. Fresh air feels like a balm. They stand, arms on the rail, faces to the wind, letting the breeze wash over them. It is a small respite. They savour it. They know they will have to descend again soon. While below deck life is unpleasant, it is not without humour or companionship. Men tell jokes to distract from discomfort. They share stories of places they have been, of strange foods eaten, of close calls with authorities or storms. They carve scrimshaw on whale bones or wood, using knives to etch images of ships, women, animals. They play simple games, rolling dice or dealing cards, betting with buttons or bits of cloth. They sing songs. Music echoes in the confined space, bouncing off beams, softening harsh edges. When a new song is taught, a ballad from Ireland, a work song from Africa, it spreads. Soon everyone knows the tune and can hum it while working. These cultural exchanges are as important as any medicine. They sustain the spirit. Another important aspect of life below decks is the sense of community that forms in adversity. When one man is sick, others bring him water. When one man loses a finger to a knife slip, his mates bandage him and support him as he recovers. When someone dies, whether from disease, injury, or misadventure, the crew comes together. They prepare the body, sew it into a canvas shroud with a weight at the feet, often a cannonball. They gather on deck. The captain or quartermaster says a few words. The body is slid over the side. It disappears into the sea with a splash. Men remove their hats, bow their heads. Some whisper prayers. Others stare silently. Afterwards, they go back below and sit together. They share memories of the fallen man. They honour him in their way. They know that one day their bodies may be committed to the same waters. This awareness of mortality creates a bond. It is morbid, but also humanizing. Scurvy, the sailor's scourge, deserves special attention. It is insidious. At first men feel tired. Their gums swell. They bruise easily. Their legs ache. They think perhaps they are just exhausted from work. But then their teeth loosen. Their skin takes on a strange pallor. Old wounds reopen. Some lose hair. The surgeon recognizes the signs. He knows that fresh fruit and vegetables are the cure. He rummages through stores, finds nothing. He might recall reading about a ship that used lime juice to stay healthy. He might have a barrel of sauerkraut from a captured German ship. He distributes it. It helps. If they are lucky enough to capture a ship carrying citrus, he orders oranges and lemons rationed carefully. Men suck on segments, feeling immediate relief. They swear they can feel strength returning. It is not magic, it is vitamin C, but to them, it might as well be magic. They praise the surgeon. They praise the cook for making a stew with cabbage. They might not understand why it helps, but they learn to value it. Disease does not respect hierarchy. Captains get sick. Quartermasters die of fever. Everyone is vulnerable. This shared vulnerability reinforces equality. When illness strikes, the crew's survival instincts kick in. They isolate the sick if they can, moving hammocks apart, designating a corner as a sick bay. They keep the air moving below deck by opening hatches when weather permits. They air out bedding in the sun when possible. They scrub the decks with vinegar or brine, believing it cleanses. They dump out bilge water more often, despite the extra labour. They try to keep rats away from food stores. These small actions show a rudimentary understanding of sanitation. They may not eliminate disease, but they reduce its spread. They also give men a sense of control, which is important when so much is uncontrollable. Injuries that are not life-threatening but painful are handled with stoicism. A smashed finger is wrapped in cloth. A broken nose is set with a splint. A cut is stitched roughly. Men bite down on pieces of rope, their eyes watering, sweat beading on their foreheads as the surgeon sews them up. They do not scream. To scream is to show weakness. Afterward, their mates slap them on the back, offer a drink, make a joke. Humour is medicine too. They mock each other in good spirit. They call a limping man Captain Hook or a toothless man Smiler. These nicknames stick. They become part of the ship's culture. They create an in-group language. Outsiders would not understand, but the crew does. It is a sign of belonging. The environment below deck contributes to the spread of disease, but it also shelters the crew from the elements. In storms, when the deck is awash with water, men gather below, grateful for the cramped safety. Lightning flashes illuminate the space through cracks. Thunder vibrates the timbers. The ship pitches and yaws. Hammocks swing wildly. Men grip their ropes, close their eyes, pray or curse. Some vomit. Others sleep, lulled by the chaos. The smell intensifies as people get sick. The surgeon and cook are busy. When the storm passes, the hatch is opened and fresh air rushes in. Men gulp it. They laugh with relief. They climb up to see what damage has been done. Below deck, the evidence of the storm remains. Overturned barrels, spilled water, wet hammocks. They set to cleaning, restoring order. As we move through this dark, crowded space, listening to the coughs, the groans, the soft snores, we understand that life below decks is a constant negotiation with discomfort. It is claustrophobic, dirty, noisy. It is also where friendships solidify, where stories are shared, where men dream. It is where they retreat when the sun is too hot or the rain too cold. It is where they hide when cannons boom and splinters fly, yet also where they come to die, quietly, in a hammock or on the floor. It is a place of contradictions. It protects and poisons. It unites and stifles. It is essential. Without it, there is no space for crew to rest. With it, disease finds a breeding ground. The crew learns to live with this paradox. We leave the belly of the ship now, climbing back up to the deck, breathing deeply as we emerge into sunlight. The smell below lingers in our clothes and hair. We shake it off. The men below continue with their lives, swinging in hammocks, coughing, laughing, telling stories. Some will come up soon to work. Others will sleep. The surgeon will tie off a wound. The cook will stir a pot. Disease and discomfort will continue to shadow them. Yet above, the wind freshens, the sky opens, and the promise of clean air and space remains. The sea itself is pure. The ship that carries them is their world, complex and contradictory, life-giving and life-threatening. In that world, below decks, above disease, they endure, they adapt, they find moments of humanity amidst the filth. We leave them there for now in the half-light, still breathing, still dreaming. War has a smell. It is the sharp tang of gunpowder, the metallic scent of fresh blood, the acrid smoke that clings to hair and clothing. It is also the salty tang of sweat, the reek of fear, and later, the sweetness of rum poured to dull pain. On a pirate ship where life vacillates between monotony and chaos, the transition from mending sails to unleashing weapons can be abrupt. One moment, a man is splicing rope. The next, he is firing a musket at a target so close he can see the whites of the enemy's eyes. In this chapter, we explore the two extremes of a pirate's existence, the violence of battle and the care that follows it. It often begins with a cry from the lookout, "Sail ho!" Men abandon their tasks. Feet thump across planks as they rush to their positions. The captain lifts his spyglass. He assesses the ship in the distance. Is it fat with cargo? Is it armed? Does it fly the flag of a nation that will pursue with vengeance? The crew gathers. A decision is made. They will give chase. With a practiced choreography, men run to the braces, haul on lines, adjust sails. The ship turns, picking up speed. Water hisses along the hull. The wind whips hair and cloth. Eyes are on the distant sail. The chase can last hours. It can be agonizingly slow, the ship's inching closer. Men squint into sunlight, measuring the distance by eye. They check the cannons, ensure powder dry, shot is ready, wicks are lit. Powder monkeys stand ready to run. Gunners adjust aim. As they close in, the black flag is raised. Sometimes, the sight of it is enough. The target surrenders, preferring to give up cargo rather than risk lives. Other times, the target runs or fights. If it runs, the chase becomes a test of seamanship. The crew trims sails perfectly, squeezes every bit of speed, cheers as they gain. If it fights, cannons speak. A gunner lights the fuse. There is a flash, a boom, a recoil that sends the gun carriage leaping back. Smoke billows. The ship shudders. The ball flies, smashes into wood, sends splinters like daggers. Men scream. The air fills with the crack of muskets, the whir of shot, the thud of grappling hooks thrown. Lines catch. Ships collide. They are lashed together. Pirates swarm across decks, cutlasses flashing, pistols firing. The melee is vicious. Faces contort with rage and fear. The clang of metal on metal rings out. Feet slip on blood-slick planks. A powder monkey darts through the chaos. He is small, perhaps only 12 years old. His job is to carry cartridges of powder from the magazine to the guns. He moves quickly, ducking under swinging arms, stepping over bodies, his ears ringing. His fingers are burned from earlier misfires. He's focused, bringing death in small paper packages. He knows if he hesitates, a gun will not fire when it needs to. Behind a cannon, a gunner shouts, "More powder!" The boy arrives just in time. A moment's delay can mean disaster. The boy's heart pounds. He does not stop. There will be time to feel later. Now there is only the task repeated over and over until the battle ends. Amid this chaos, the ship's surgeon prepares. He hears the first volley and knows what will follow. He lays out his tools, saws, knives, needles, thread, tourniquets. He heats iron in the fire. He fills a jug with rum. He knows men will come to him missing limbs, bleeding, screaming. He knows he must act quickly. There is no time for tenderness. He must cut cleanly, efficiently. His hands shake slightly, not from fear but from the knowledge of what he must do. He steels himself. His assistant, perhaps a young sailor with no desire to be a surgeon, stands ready with cloths, bandages, more rum. In the corner, under low light, there is a makeshift operating table, a plank laid across barrels. The surgeon waits, listening to the battle above, counting the seconds between cannon blasts. When the first injured man arrives, carried by two of his mates, the surgeon takes in the injury in a glance, an arm blown off below the elbow. He pours rum on the wound, both to disinfect and to numb, though the numbness is minimal. He gives the man a cup to drink. The man gulps, gasps. He bites down on a leather strap. The surgeon ties off the upper arm tightly. He takes his saw. He places it above the wound. He looks the man in the eyes. For a moment there is connection. Then he saws. The sound is awful, grinding through bone. Blood sprays. The man's face contorts. He grunts, then screams. The surgeon works quickly. When the limb is off, he applies a heated iron to the stump. The smell of searing flesh fills the small space. Smoke curls. The man's body shakes. The surgeon wraps the stump with bandages. He instructs the assistants to hold the patient until the shaking stops. He wipes his hands on his apron, stained red. He turns to the next patient. He cannot dwell. Above, the battle rages. Men are hit, fall, and are carried below. Some die immediately. Others die on the way. Some survive their injuries for hours, days, weeks. In the surgeon's corner, time blurs. The cries of agony blend with the shouts from above. The smell of blood and rum becomes one. When the fighting stops, there is a lull. The injured are tended. The dead are laid aside. The surgeon's hands tremble as he washes them in a basin of seawater. He drinks from the rum bottle, not to forget, but to steady himself. He knows some of those he treated will not make it through the night. Infection will set in. Fever will rise. He does not know about bacteria, but he knows that wounds that look clean can turn foul. He watches, checks bandages, changes them. He listens to breathing. He feels foreheads. He works by touch and instinct. He is part healer, part butcher. Violence on a pirate ship is not limited to battles with other ships. Discipline, when needed, can be violent. The articles often prescribe harsh punishments. Theft among crew is considered one of the worst crimes. A man caught stealing might have his ears or nose cut, then be marooned. Desertion or cowardice in battle could be punishable by death. The crew decides. The quartermaster enforces. The punishments serve as deterrents. They are carried out with ceremony. If a man is to be marooned, the crew gathers. They row him to a deserted island, give him a bottle of water and a pistol with one shot. They leave. There is no triumph in it, only grim necessity. If a man is to be flogged, the whip leaves deep cuts. The men watch, understanding the severity of their code. It is violence used to maintain order in a violent world. Keel hauling is rarely employed, but it exists in the law. The condemned man is tied to a rope and pulled under the ship's hull, scraping against barnacles and incrustations. If he is lucky, he drowns quickly. If not, his skin is ripped and he surfaces bleeding and gasping. Such punishment is extreme and usually reserved for severe offences. Its rarity does not diminish its terror. The knowledge that it could be invoked keeps men mindful of the rules. It also illustrates the brutal edge of pirate justice. In a community that prides itself on fairness internally, the consequences of betrayal are severe. Violence disciplines as well as defends. Amidst this violence, the promise of compensation for injuries appears almost compassionate. The articles guarantee payments to those who lose limbs or are otherwise disabled. A man who loses an arm might receive $800, a fortune compared to naval wages. This money could sustain him on land. It shows an acknowledgement of the physical cost of piracy. It is a small comfort to a man who has just had his leg removed. He knows he will not be destitute. It also incentivizes bravery. Men are more willing to risk injury knowing they or their family will be cared for. Violence and care, brutality and compassion are intertwined. Primary sources occasionally provide glimpses of this reality. Captain Charles Johnson's General History of the Pirates includes accounts of fights and punishments. It tells of how pirates attacked like hellhounds, their faces blackened to look fierce. It describes the dreadful shrieks of men cut down. Other sources, like surgeons' journals, record the number of amputations after a battle, the herbs used to treat fever, the desperation when supplies ran low. These writings are matter of fact, recounting horrors in plain language. They remind us that what we imagine as dramatic spectacle was, for them, part of life. They did not have the luxury of flinching. They had to act, or men would die. The tools of violence themselves are worth noting. The cutlass is the iconic pirate weapon, a short, curved sword ideal for close combat. It can hack through rope and flesh. Pistols are single-shot flintlocks. They are inaccurate and slow to reload. Pirates often carry two, firing one and then discarding it to draw the second. Boarding axes are used to cut through netting and lines. Grappling hooks have sharpened tines that dig into wood. Cannons are loaded with cannonballs, grape shot or chain shot. Grape shot, clusters of small iron balls, turns people into ragged flesh. Chain shot, two balls connected by a chain, whirls through the air, slicing masts and rigging. These weapons create wounds that the surgeon must deal with. A musket ball leaves a hole that can be probed and sometimes removed. Grape shot shreds, chain shot dismembers. The surgeon works with what remains. Outside of battle, violence surfaces in other ways. Fights break out over cards or dice. The articles stipulate that duels must be fought ashore. This rule prevents bloodshed on the ship where space is limited. When they reach land, the duelists choose pistols or swords. Seconds are appointed. A line is drawn. The duel is fought according to agreed rules. It ends when one man is wounded or apologizes. The duel is ceremonial, containing violence within ritual. It channels anger into a controlled encounter. It upholds honor. The quartermaster often oversees to ensure fairness. Afterward, the men shake hands. The tension dissipates. Violence thus serves to resolve conflict without fracturing the crew. The surgeon's role extends beyond the aftermath of battles and duels. He deals with daily injuries, splinters, sprained ankles, infected teeth. He extracts rotting teeth with pliers, the sound of bone cracking echoing in the small space. He drains abscesses. He sets bones with splints and cloth. He mixes herbal concoctions using knowledge gleaned from indigenous healers encountered in ports or from other sailors. He might have laudanum, a tincture of opium, to dull pain. He uses tobacco as a poultice, honey to cover wounds. He consults an old medical book, its pages stained and dog-eared. He's a lifelong learner, adjusting his methods. He may also be a friend, listening to men's fears in quiet moments, offering a gentle word. His presence is both feared and welcomed. He brings pain, he alleviates pain. He stands between life and death. Violence, medicine, and the code that binds them reflect the contradictions of pirate life. The same hands that shove an enemy into the sea can lift a wounded comrade onto the surgeon's table. The same mouth that curses a fleeing merchant captain can sing a soothing song to a man writhing in pain. The same heart that races with adrenaline during boarding slows with compassion when applying a bandage. There is humanity in this brutality. It is not sanitized or noble, but it is real. The pirates do not revel in gore, they accept it. They do not glorify bloodshed, they know its cost. They choose violence when it brings freedom and wealth, but they temper it with care within their ranks. As we listen to the echoes of cannon fire fade, as we smell the lingering gunpowder, as we hear the soft moans below deck, we understand that the art of medicine and violence on a pirate ship is a dance. It is a dance between destruction and healing, between taking and giving, between ending life and preserving it. It is messy, improvised, driven by necessity. It is as much a part of the pirate story as treasure maps and secret coves. It reveals that these men were not caricatures but complicated beings navigating a harsh world. We leave them now as they repair, as they bind wounds, as they clean blood from planks. The surgeon sighs and wipes his brow. The captain inspects damage. The quartermaster counts casualties. The crew gathers for a drink. They toast the fallen, the wounded themselves. They joke about the powder monkey's bravery, about the surgeon's stern face. They laugh and cry. The sea, indifferent, stretches out. Another battle will come, another wound will need stitching, another life will end. In the meantime, they mend sails, scrub decks, and practice with weapons. They prepare, they live. The art of medicine and violence continues, an ever-present rhythm in their lives. We drift away, carrying with us the image of a surgeon's hands stained with blood and a powder monkey's feet racing across a smoke-filled deck. The echoes of their world linger, soft and sharp like the memory of a distant gunshot. What happens when the cannons fall silent, when the sails fill with steady wind, when the sun sinks into the sea and darkness wraps itself around the ship like a blanket? In the spaces between storms and battles, pirates are not just thieves and fighters. They are people with dreams, fears, memories, and a longing for comfort. This chapter explores the quiet moments of humanity aboard a pirate ship, where the sounds of laughter, song, and whispered stories mingle with the creak of wood and the sigh of waves. It is in these moments that the men remind themselves who they are and why they chose this life. After a day of labour, as the light fades and the sky blushes orange and pink, the mood aboard shifts. The frenetic pace slows. The quartermaster finishes his tally of provisions. The captain stands at the helm for a moment longer before handing it over to the night watch. Men gather in small groups. Someone pulls out a deck of cards made from thick paper, the edges soft from handling. They shuffle and deal with practiced ease. Others roll dice, the cubes clattering on the wood. Bets are placed, not with coins, which are carefully guarded, but with favours, buttons, extra servings of grog. The stakes are small, but the tension is real. Cheating is risky. The articles forbid gambling for money on some ships, but not all. Games provide distraction. They also teach men about each other, who bluffs, who takes risks, who laughs when he loses. In another corner under a lantern's warm glow, a man holds a piece of bone or shell. He has carved away its rough edges with a knife. Using the tip, he etches a pattern, perhaps a ship with full sails, perhaps a woman's face, perhaps a creature from a childhood tale. This art, called scrimshaw when done on whalebone, is a way to pass time. The man's tongue sticks out slightly in concentration. His friends watch, offer suggestions, tease gently. When he has finished, He rubs ink into the groove so the image stands out. He shows it around. Music is a thread that weaves through these moments. Someone fetches a fiddle from his chest, a treasured possession wrapped carefully in cloth. He tunes it by ear, plucking strings, turning pegs. He draws the bow across the strings. The first notes are rough, then smooth out. He begins a jig, and feet tap without thinking. Someone joins with a flute, its high notes dancing above the fiddle's resonance. Voices hum. Soon the crew is singing a sea shanty. The song's call and response structure matches their labour rhythms. Even at rest, the pattern comforts. The lyrics are sometimes bawdy, sometimes melancholic. They tell stories of ports visited, of girls left behind, of storms weathered. Singing together synchronizes breaths and hearts. It is a communal act. It reminds them that they are not alone. Storytelling is another vital pastime. A man with a flair for drama sits cross-legged, pipe in hand. He clears his throat. Others lean in. He begins with the words, "Did I ever tell you about the time?" The story could be about a narrow escape from a naval vessel, a ghostly apparition seen on a moonless night, a treasure found and lost. It could be a retelling of a famous pirate's deeds, embellished with each telling. Details change, names shift. The core remains: daring, adventure, wit. The listeners gasp at the right moments, laugh at the humour, shiver at the scary parts. Sometimes a story is about home, a child's laughter, a field of wheat, a village square. These tales make eyes misty. They transport men from the heaving deck to another place. They soothe homesickness. They create a shared narrative, a sense of belonging to a larger world. Letters are read and written in these times of relative calm. Not every pirate is literate, but those who are help the others. A man might ask a comrade to write a letter to his mother or wife. "Tell her I am well," he says. "Tell her I think of her when I look at the stars." The scribe dips his quill into ink, forming careful letters that will travel across oceans. The letter might not be delivered. It might be seized or lost. It might reach its destination years late. Still, the act of writing and sealing it is meaningful. It is an assertion of connection. It is hope. When letters are received, rare and precious, men gather to listen. The reader sounds out the words. The letter might contain news of births, deaths, marriages. It might scold the writer for his choices or express pride. Tears are not uncommon, laughter too. Letters remind pirates that they are loved, that someone cares. They also remind them of what they have left behind and why they cannot return easily. There are rituals for certain occasions. When a man has a birthday, if he knows the date, the crew might mark it. They cannot bake a cake, but they can gather scraps of dried fruit and sugar and make a sweet pudding. They might sing a song. They might give him a carved trinket or a new pair of socks. When the ship crosses the equator, there is often a ceremony. Men who have never crossed before, green hands, are initiated. The ritual varies. Sometimes they are dunked in water. Sometimes they must kiss a greasy pole. It is silly, messy, good-natured. It breaks monotony. It connects them to a long tradition of seafarers marking this geographical line. These rituals might seem frivolous, but they give structure to a life that otherwise blends days together. They create memories distinct from battles and storms. Friendships form. Men find kindred spirits among the crew. Two might share a love of poetry. At night they recite verses by candlelight. Another pair might both be from the same region. They swap stories of local festivals. A group might bond over a shared experience. fighting off a mutiny, surviving a storm, being marooned and rescued. These friendships are deep because they are forged under stress. They involve trust. A man must be able to rely on his friend to watch his back in a fight, to share water when supplies run low, to speak up for him in a dispute. They also involve vulnerability. In a world where bravado is currency, showing vulnerability is rare. A friend is someone with whom you can be honest, if only for a moment. These bonds are lifelines. They anchor the men emotionally. Humour is a coping mechanism. The jokes are crude, dark, sometimes self-deprecating. A man missing a leg is nicknamed Tripod. Another with a scar across his face is Pretty Boy. They make fun of themselves, their condition, their leaders. They mock the captain's fancy coat or the quartermaster's bald head. They tell puns about parrots and peg legs. They laugh at bodily functions. They find humour in misfortune because laughter is a shield against fear. When the weather is foul and the food is worse, a joke can make it bearable. When someone suggests that the weevils in the biscuits count as extra protein, there is genuine laughter. When someone imitates the ship's parson, if there is one, and his solemn prayers, eyes roll and chuckles ripple. Humour is rebellion. It is release. There are quieter moments of humanity too. A man might sit alone at the rail staring into the water. His eyes are soft. He thinks of a loved one. He fingers a ring on a chain around his neck. He feels the pull of home. He does not join the games. He listens to the music but does not sing. His comrades do not disturb him. They understand. Everyone has such moments. At times the ship seems to float in a bubble of stillness. The sea is calm, the sky clear. No sails are visible. No duties demand attention. Men lie on their backs on the deck looking up at the stars. Someone points out constellations, Orion, the Big Dipper, unfamiliar southern stars. They talk about how ancient mariners used these patterns to navigate. They marvel at the immensity of the universe. In those moments, the world feels vast and beautiful, and their troubles shrink. Pets, when they are aboard, offer comfort. A parrot might sit on a man's shoulder, squawking nonsense words learned in a port tavern. A monkey might cling to the rigging, chattering. A dog might curl up at the cook's feet, sighing contentedly. These animals provide companionship. They remind men of land. They become mascots. If an animal dies, it is mourned. It is another small loss in a life filled with losses. When a parrot flies away at a port, the man who cared for it watches with mixed feelings. Sadness for the loss, happiness that it is free. Pets also serve as entertainment. A parrot that curses in perfect Portuguese can reduce the crew to laughter. A monkey that steals a hat and runs sends men chasing, forgetting their aches. Religious faith, though often portrayed as absent among pirates, has its place. Some men pray silently before battle. Others light a candle for St. Nicholas, the patron saint of sailors. A few carry small crosses or amulets. Faith is personal. There is no shipboard church service, but there are whispered prayers. A man who is literate might read aloud from a Bible. The words, familiar and comforting, drift in the humid air. They remind some of their mothers. They remind others of a time when life was simpler. Faith coexists with superstition. Men avoid whistling on deck. It could bring wind. They don't kill albatrosses. Bad luck. They nail coins to the mast. Good luck. They share stories of ghosts and omens. These beliefs form a patchwork spiritual life. It is not organised, but it is sincere. Moments of intimacy occur. A hand rests briefly on another's shoulder, a gesture of support. two men lean in close to share secrets. They laugh softly. On rare occasions, romance blossoms. A pirate might fall in love with a woman in a port or with a man on the ship. Such relationships are fraught. They carry risks of jealousy, of betrayal, of punishment if discovered. But they exist. Humans seek connection. In the darkness, beneath the stars, arms entwine. Lips meet. For a moment, the labels of pirate, outlaw, sailor disappear. There are only two people finding solace. The ship moves on. The moment ends. It becomes a memory carried like a talisman against loneliness. The natural world provides its own entertainment. Flying fish skimming over waves elicit smiles. Dolphins racing alongside the bow cause cheers. A whale breaching near the ship draws gasps and awe. Rainbows after storms are greeted with quiet wonder. A curious shark circling is watched with a mixture of fear and fascination. A school of tiny fish sparkling in moonlight is mesmerizing. These encounters with wildlife remind the men that they are part of a large ecosystem. They are not masters of the sea, but participants in it. They recognize beauty when it appears. They feel humbled. They tell stories about these creatures later, embellishing sizes and behaviors. The tales become part of the ship's lore. Craftsmanship flourishes in idle hours. Some men carve wooden spoons or bowls using whatever scrap wood they can find. They whittle figurines. They weave rope into mats or decorative knots. Knot tying becomes a form of artistry, producing intricate patterns. These objects can be traded in port or kept as gifts. A skilled sailmaker might sew a fancy shirt for himself or a friend using captured cloth. A cooper might fashion a small barrel to store personal belongings. Creativity is resourcefulness. It turns boredom into productivity. It also creates a sense of ownership. A man who's made his own bowl eats from it with pride. He guards it. He cares for it. When it breaks, he is genuinely distressed. It is more than a piece of wood. It is a symbol of his skill and time. Children of the sea, young boys who, joined by choice or by force, find ways to be children. They play simple games, tag around barrels, hide and seek in the hold, races up the rigging. They make toys from rope and cloth. They mimic older sailors, practicing knots, trying on hats, strutting like captains. The older men watch with amusement and occasional indulgence. They remember being boys. They instruct gently. They scold when necessary. They become surrogate fathers. The boys absorb sea lore as if it is the only law. They learn to spit over the lee side, not windward. They learn to keep their powder dry. They learn that laughter helps, even when fear lurks. They will grow quickly in this environment, but for now, they are allowed moments of innocence. As night deepens, some men sleep, others keep watch. The ship glides through water that glows with bioluminescence. Each disturbance leaves a trail of light. It is enchanting. A hand trailing in the water leaves a stream of stars. Laughter becomes whispers. Snoring becomes background. A lonely flute plays a tune that echoes across the waves. It fades. Silence settles. In that stillness, the men feel the immensity of the ocean. They feel small and yet significant. They are part of something larger. They have chosen each other. They have chosen this life, with all its dangers and delights. Their humanity is not erased by their crimes. It coexists. It manifests in their games, their songs, their art, their laughter, their tears. It is a light that flickers but doesn't go out. We leave them in this quietness, our own ears filled with the memory of their voices. We think of the carved bone, the worn cards, the rumbling laughter, the whispered prayer. We imagine the salt on their skin, the warmth of the fiddle's wood, the softness of a dog's fur. We feel the ship's gentle roll. It is in these moments of humanity that the pirates reveal themselves not as myths but as men, complex, contradictory, capable of kindness and cruelty, humour and violence, love and loss. Their stories, told softly, invite us to look beyond the stereotypes and see the people they were. We will carry these images with us as we sail into the next part of their tale. Every journey, no matter how daring, must eventually face its end. The golden age of piracy, that brief span of years when black flags fluttered proudly against blue skies, did not last forever. Forces larger than any one crew or captain conspired to extinguish the outlaw utopia pirates tried to build. In this chapter, we watch as the horizon darkens, as the noose tightens, and as the men who once defied kings are hunted, hanged, or forgiven. It is a story of decline, but also of transformation, how real lives become legends. The first hints of change arrive softly. In taverns in Nassau, whispers circulate that European nations, exhausted by constant losses, are forming coalitions to eradicate piracy. Rumours of new governors, appointed solely to cleanse the seas, reach the ears of captains. Men scoff. They have heard threats before. Yet, there is unease. A few pirate ships vanish without a trace. Others return battered, telling tales of pursuing warships faster and better armed than any merchantman. The balance that once favoured pirates begins to shift. Spain, France, and England invest in their navies. Captains who once outran pursuers find they are now being chased down. The seas grow more dangerous, not because of storms, but because of justice. A particular story illustrates this shift. It is 1718. The pirate capital of Nassau has flourished under the unofficial governance of men like Charles Vane and Benjamin Hornigold. Ships come and go, selling stolen goods, refitting, recruiting. It is a haven for outlaws. But then, a new governor arrives, Woodes Rogers. He brings with him a fleet and a royal proclamation, a pardon for pirates who surrender, and the promise of death for those who refuse. The offer is simple. If you lay down your arms and swear off piracy, you will be forgiven. If you continue, you will be hunted. Some laugh. Others listen. Rogers is a former privateer. He knows the pirate mindset. He promises land, citizenship, the chance to start anew. He also has letters of marque that allow him to use force. He is not bluffing. Men gather in the square. They discuss. Some are tired of the chase. They have lost friends. They have broken bones. They have enough money to live comfortably. They consider accepting the pardon. Others are committed. They are attached to their life at sea. They do not trust the king's word. They fear that surrender means hanging. Debates are heated. In the end, a significant number of pirates accept Rogers's terms. They lay down their weapons. They swear oaths. They become private citizens or privateers. Others sail away defiantly, black flags raised. They refuse to relinquish their freedom. The community divides. A sense of unity breaks. The haven is lost. Those who refuse the pardon soon find themselves in a changed world. Navies patrol waters that were once safe. Governors coordinate efforts, sharing intelligence. Rewards are offered for the capture of notorious pirates. Former pirates, now pardon holders, sometimes turn hunter, using their knowledge of hideouts. Betrayal becomes commonplace. A captain might be given up by a former comrade in exchange for clemency. Trust erodes. The sense of brotherhood that bound crews is tested. When news of betrayal spreads, men become paranoid. They sleep with knives under their pillows. They watch each other with suspicion. Fear gnaws at them from within as much as from the outside. Some pirates attempt to adapt. They change flags. They sail to less policed waters, the Indian Ocean, the South China Sea, the coast of West Africa. They try to operate in smaller crews, making them harder to detect. They attack different targets, smaller ships, local vessels. They avoid the heavily guarded Spanish galleons and East Indiamen. They succeed for a time. They capture and plunder. They share out booty. But the profits are smaller, the risks higher. One by one, famous captains are caught. Blackbeard, Edward Teach, is cornered by Lieutenant Robert Maynard near Ocracoke Island in 1718. In a fierce battle, Teach is shot and slashed repeatedly. His head is cut off and hung from Maynard's bowsprit as a warning. His body is thrown overboard. The message is clear. The age of impunity is over. Henry Jennings is pardoned and becomes a legitimate privateer. Black Bart Roberts, perhaps the most successful pirate with over 400 ships captured, is killed in 1722 by the Royal Navy. His body is buried at sea. Charles Vane is captured in Jamaica and hanged. The cruelest image of this decline is that of bodies dangling in gibbets along harbours. Governors order executed pirates to be displayed prominently. They hang from iron cages, swinging slightly in the wind, their faces frozen in grimaces. Birds peck at their flesh. Waves lap below. Locals look up, children pointing, elders warning. See what happens to those who defy the king. For pirates still at sea, these grim warnings are sometimes glimpsed as they sail past. The sight is chilling. It forces them to imagine their own bodies there, decaying above the water. It serves as psychological warfare. The message is relentless. We are coming for you. Economic shifts also play a role in the decline. In the early 18th century, Europe's trade patterns change. War subsidies end. Peace brings different shipping schedules and protections. Merchants invest in convoys and armed escorts. Insurance becomes more widespread. It becomes harder to catch a lone rich ship. Some pirates turn to smuggling. Others work as fishermen or traders. The environment that allowed piracy to flourish, weak naval presence, plentiful rich targets, safe havens, no longer exists. Combined with determined military campaigns, piracy becomes unsustainable. By the mid-1720s, the Golden Age is effectively over. Even as the reality of piracy declines, stories grow. Newspapers, pamphlets, and books circulate tales of daring pirates. Some are factual, others fantastical. Captain Charles Johnson's General History of the Pirates is published in 1724. It combines real names and events with embellished stories. It paints pirates as larger than life, charismatic, ruthless, romantic. The public is fascinated. They devour these tales. They reimagine pirates as heroes, anti-heroes, villains. Plays are written, songs are sung. Pirates become folk legends, joining the pantheon of outlaw figures who defy authority. The line between fact and fiction blurs. Pirates themselves sometimes lean into these myths, cultivating fearsome reputations to intimidate targets. Blackbeard's practice of placing slow-burning fuses in his beard during battle is part performance, designed to appear demonic. The transformation of real men into myths begins while they are still alive. We can follow one man through this transition. He is a composite, but his story reflects many. He started as a sailor on a merchant ship. He was treated poorly, beaten for minor mistakes, paid little. He joined a pirate crew in search of fairer treatment. He found camaraderie, democracy, and fortune. He voted in councils, fought in battles, sang songs. He shared spoils. He lost friends. He loved. When the proclamation of pardon came, he hesitated. He liked the freedom but saw the writing on the wall. He accepted. He swore off piracy. He tried to live a quiet life in a coastal town. People knew his past. Some respected him. Others shunned him. He missed the sea. He missed his comrades. He wrote letters to those still at sea. He hoped they would come ashore before it was too late. Some did. Others died. He died of fever 10 years later, his life folding into local law. Children whispered that he once sailed with Blackbeard. His grandchildren remembered him as a quiet man who sometimes stared at the horizon. The decline of piracy does not erase its impact. The pirates influenced maritime law. Their codes informed later naval regulations. Their practices, compensation for injuries, division of spoils, election of leaders, echo in modern systems. They also left genetic legacies. Men settled in colonies, married local women, raised families. Their descendants live in places like the Bahamas, Cuba, and the Carolinas. Cultural legacies remain. Phrases, songs, and traditions. Pieces of 8, shiver me timbers, or walk the plank. Even if the last is more myth than reality, enter common usage. The black flag becomes a symbol recognized worldwide. Pirates become anti-establishment icons, co-opted by literature, theatre, film, and music. They are romanticized, sanitized, demonized. They are, in some narratives, freedom fighters, in others, bloodthirsty villains. The reality is more complex. As we witness the fading of these real lives, we also see the birth of legends. The same events that mark the end of piracy feed the stories that keep it alive. The hanging of Blackbeard's head becomes a macabre detail in a ballad. The execution of Anne Bonny and Mary Red is dramatized, though historically they were imprisoned and possibly pardoned. The democratic practices of pirate crews inspire writers and thinkers. The image of a skull over crossed bones becomes a brand. Children play at pirates with eye patches and plastic swords. Adults read stories of buried treasure and secret maps. The romance of rebellion endures, yet underneath the legends are the bones. The real men and women who died on gibbets, who were amputated by ship surgeons, who suffered scurvy, who laughed at jokes in the darkness, who voted to depose captains, who nursed each other through fever. Their lives were gritty and harsh. They made choices in specific contexts. They were products of their time. The fact that their stories are remembered at all is testament to the human need to find meaning in rebellion. We reframe their suffering into narratives of freedom because we long for freedom ourselves. We ignore or gloss over the cruelty because reality is messy, legend is cleaner. The line between fading into legend and disappearing completely is thin. Many pirates' names are lost. We know nothing of the deckhands who never became captains. Their stories are folded into the generic pirate. Others are known only by single deeds, a mutiny, a daring escape, a particularly cruel act. These fragments influence our perception. A pirate becomes the sum of a handful of stories repeated and embellished. The complexity of the person is gone. The legend remains. Perhaps that is inevitable. History often simplifies. The challenge is to remember the individuals behind the myths. When we do, their humanity shines through, even in their decline. By the 1730s, piracy in its classic Golden Age form is largely gone. Privateers continue to operate under government licenses. Smugglers ply their trade in various seas. Outlaws exist, but organised pirate republics do not. The image of a pirate as a man with a tricorn hat, a parrot on his shoulder, and a treasure map in his hand is solidified in fiction. Generations of children grow up with Treasure Island, Peter Pan, and other stories. They imagine adventure and freedom. They seldom imagine the smell of bilge, the taste of salt pork, the fear of disease, the weight of decisions. They take the legend and leave the reality. That is what legends are for, to inspire, to entertain, to symbolize. But behind them, there is always truth, waiting quietly. We have traced the arc of piracy from its beginnings in despair and rebellion, through its vibrant middle, to its decline under pressure from nations and changing economies. We have seen how it gave men a taste of democracy, a glimpse of equality, and a chance at wealth. We've also seen its violence, its cruelty, its contradictions. In this chapter, we see it fade, not with a bang, but with a series of muffled splashes, the sound of bodies hitting water, of cannonballs missing their mark, of coins clinking in legitimate transactions as former pirates pay for bread. As the Golden Age fades, the colours of piracy bleed into the tapestry of history. They do not disappear. They become threads in a larger pattern. The last scene of this chapter is quiet. A ship that once flew the Jolly Roger sits at anchor, its flag furled. The hull is weathered, its cannons are gone, sold to pay debts. A few men remain aboard, repairing nets. They will fish now. They will live off the sea without robbing. An old man sits on the deck carving a piece of wood. His hands are steady. He hums a familiar tune. He looks out at the horizon where the sky meets the water. He remembers a time when he stood at this rail, watching another ship approach, heart pounding. He smiles faintly. He knows those days are over. He knows stories are being told about him that are not true. He lets them. He closes his eyes. He hears the ocean. It sounds the same as it always has. He is at peace. We leave him there between the real and the imagined, a living link to a world that is ending and beginning. He is fading into legend, even as he breathes. His story, like so many others, will be told and retold, embellished and simplified, but somewhere, someone will remember the truth of hunger, of laughter, of wind in the rigging, of fear, of camaraderie. The golden age of piracy may have ended, but its echo lingers, a whisper on the sea breeze, a song in the night. We listen. We honour. We let the legends form, knowing that behind them there were men and women who lived and died in search of something elusive, a life of their own choosing. The waves have settled. The sails, once billowing in pursuit, now hang loose in a quiet harbour. Our lantern burns low, casting soft light on the pages that have carried us through the lives of those men and women who sailed under the Jolly Roger. We have walked their decks and felt the sway of their hammocks. We have tasted their salt-cured meat and listened to their songs. We have seen their wounds and witnessed their democracy. We have watched as their flags unfurled and then were lowered for the last time. What lingers from these journeys is not just a catalogue of facts, but a set of impressions, of textures and sounds. There is the rhythm of a crew hauling on a line together, voices blending as one. There is the quiet joy of a bowl of stew seasoned with spices from a captured ship. There is the sharp thrill of a vote that dethrones a captain and raises another. There is the cool relief of rainwater running down a thirsty throat, the warmth of a fiddle tune on a lonely night, the gentle slap of water against a hull when stars are bright and close. There is the moment when a man signs his name to a set of articles and feels, perhaps for the first time, that he has a say in his own fate. There are also darker impressions, the smell of the bilge, thick and foul, the sight of blood pooling on a surgeon's plank, the scream of a man being pulled under a keel, the unmarked graves at sea, the fear in a sailor's eyes when a British frigate appears on the horizon, the suspicion that seeps in when pardons are offered and loyalties are tested, the hollow clank of chains as bodies swing in gibbet cages above harbours. These images remind us that piracy was not a game. It was a choice made in a world of harsh hierarchies and narrow options. It offered a different kind of hardship and a different kind of freedom. We have seen how men who were beaten and cheated on merchant ships created their own codes, their own rough justice. We have seen how they shared food and votes, how they punished theft and desertion. We have watched their communities fall apart under pressure from governments and economies. We have traced their stories into myth. We have felt their humanity in their jokes, their art, their songs, their care for each other. We have acknowledged their violence. It is all part of their truth. As we close this chapter, we do not tie up every loose end. History rarely allows us that. There are still questions that drift like flotsam. Did Mary Read die in prison, or did she escape to another life? Did Anne Bonny live to old age, telling her children tales of the sea? How many names have been lost entirely, stories untold? What other codes and customs did we never learn? How different might our world be if the principles of pirate democracy had taken deeper root on land? These questions hover, inviting contemplation, resisting easy answers. Not everything must be solved to be remembered. Perhaps what resonates most is the notion of choice. For all the constraints and dangers, pirates chose their path. They chose each other. They chose to write their own rules, however flawed. They chose to chase the horizon, to find freedom in the in-between spaces, between nations, between legalities, between land and sea. There is something in that choice that speaks to us. It whispers of the human desire to be seen and to have a voice, to build community in unlikely places, to risk everything for a taste of autonomy. Thank you for wandering with us through this obscure chronicle. Thank you for sitting by our proverbial fire and listening as the wind carried tales of another time. As you blow out your candle, as you pull your blanket tighter, as you close your eyes, let the rhythm of the ocean continue in your mind. Let the voices of those pirates singing softly under a sky full of stars accompany you into sleep. And if you hear a whisper in the dark, perhaps it is the echo of their laughter, their shouts, their songs, a reminder that somewhere between fact and legend, their spirits still sail. Perhaps that is all they ever wanted, to disappear quietly into the vastness, leaving behind stories that shimmer and fade like distant sails on the horizon.